Top Game with your host, Sammy Castro. Episode 15, 3MEF's own SgtMaj Mario Marquez, aka El Mariachi. Admin note, for those of you adjusting to life on Okinawa, visit the Living in Japan Facebook page for cultural awareness tips. Co-hosted by Sergeant Major and Mrs. Marty Gregory, you'll find great insight into the nuances surrounding Okinawa's unique human terrain. The hosts rely on years of personal experience living in the region and cover diverse topics to include Japanese movie theater etiquette, the subtleties of bowing, and other customs and courtesies associated with life in Japan. Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed on Top Game are those of the producers or the guests on the program and do not reflect the views and opinions of the United States Marine Corps or the Department of Defense. Thanks for tuning in. I know I've made it when I have business cards.
Awesome. Oh, and that's the logo you made on the right, isn't it?
Well, I had
Is
a
extra. Can I have it?
yeah. That's for you, Sir Major. That I had a. I didn't make the logo. I just had an artist design it for us.
Yeah.
But really good guy, easy to work with.
Yeah.
I've got some of my good friends are competing in a jiu-jitsu tournament today.
Yeah.
So when we're done, I'm gonna pack up and head over there.
Where's it at?
It's at the Budokan.
Yeah, Marty. You know Marty, my co-host?
Yeah.
Is it a kids tournament too?
Well, yeah, the kids tournament and adults.
Yeah. So Marty's kids are all doing that today.
They're doing jiu-jitsu
Yeah.
with
That's
Ivan
what she's
Sakamoto.
doing right now. I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I just told her, hey, because we talk a lot now.
Right.
We're doing the show all the time, so I told her, hey, I'm getting ready to kick the show.
You could throw on the headphones whenever you want. Okay. So yeah, let's talk about that. Where did that idea come from? What's this show called?
So our show is called Living in Japan: Cultural Awareness and Tips, and I have to go way back to like 1990. 1990, when I was here as a brand new PFC Lance Corporal, I remember listening to the Okinawa radio shows, and they were bilingual. They would speak Japanese, they would speak English, and they were always joking and clowning. But you could understand the context of the discussion, even though it was in Japanese, just by how good the DJs were. And they made us laugh, they made us go to events, they attracted us to be more involved in the culture. So I was here for about 4 years, my first tour. Moved on and went on to other places. But fast forward, I became the MEF Sergeant Major in 2017. And Sergeant Major Bonner, my predecessor, had a radio show that involved senior enlisted talking about
Senior enlisted things.
Things, right. And
Like a Top Game predecessor.
That's right. He was the original, right? But in a different way. And then I was thinking pretty deeply about what could I do to make an even better impact and impression on U.S., Okinawan, and Japan relations. How could I genuinely get both sides to want to be better connected, not because of politics, not because of liberty incidents, but because it was the right thing to do. So when AFN brought me back on to take on Sergeant Major Bonner's show, I just asked the question, hey, can I bring somebody on? I hadn't discovered anyone yet, but can I bring somebody on and do a culture show? Can I teach? Can we teach, Japanese culture, not some language necessarily, but things on how to survive and operate on a daily basis? And they said, Sergeant Major, you can do
whatever you want. You're the Sergeant Major.
As long as, pretty much, but as long as it's clean, as long as it's of value, as long as your audience will make use of it and benefit from it. So I said, okay. So I wrote down these 12 initiatives that I have, and it's a bunch of different kind of ideas that I have for my 3-year tour here.
I have a similar list for the podcast.
Yeah, so it's important to set out your goals, and
some of them are just spitball ideas, like maybe that one or two of them might not pan out as you take a certain vector or direction.
Yeah, and I tell you, 2 or 3 of those I just haven't gotten to them. You know, and I'll talk about that later.
How many shows are you in?
So we just finished our 10th show.
Okay.
And the show is, I'm told, the #1 show on AFN. Not only in Okinawa, but at least in all of Japan. and it's being aired in places like Korea, the Philippines. I mean, I was at all
So
those
it's
embassies.
regionally distributed
It's
via
regionally,
AFN.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So it's a regional impact. And so when I thought of this idea, I had to have a co-host. I had to have somebody with credibility,
Yeah.
who's Japanese, who knows the language, who's lived in the culture, not necessarily just married into it. So that's when I found my co-host Mari Gregory, who's married to a major in the United States Marine Corps. She's one of our officers in the MEF, and she owns this page called the Okinawa Cafe Journal. Very popular page. I didn't know much about it. One of my friends, Mrs. Julia Salazar, who's a protocol officer over at the mall,
Okay.
shot me the link, and so eventually I
Like,
got
check
to
this
it.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I eventually started checking it out, and she wrote so well.
Yeah.
Very professional, very well presented. But there was no photos of her, so it was all just me imagining what this person is based on her writing style. And then one day, I kind of found her Facebook. I shot her a message, said, "This is who I am," and she responded. We met the next day. Her and her husband. We all met. We just talked about some ideas I had, and then she went off on vacation for a month. But as soon as she came back, we hit it off, and we started planning and talking about all kinds of things. And now, just like this opportunity, which I'm very grateful for, now we're doing offshoot. I got civilian contractors wanting to do culture videos voluntarily,
Okay.
just so they can put them on their pages. And so
Right.
we're starting that this weekend. So you can see it's all expanded into something I never imagined. Just like you,
Yeah.
I never imagined it was gonna take off like it has, and it's all genuine. That's what I like about it. And so I'm saying all that because I want to connect it to what you're doing, because I really appreciate it. And some of the guys, Kevin Simmons was one of my Marines in the Middle East.
Yeah, he had a lot of good things to
Yeah.
say about you. When you were identified as the incoming MEF Sergeant Major, he's like, "Sam, you're gonna love this guy. He's a fucking warfighter." And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, not that Sergeant Major Bonner wasn't,
Yeah.
because I remember when we had just arrived in right around end of August, and we had the birthday ball celebration for the staff and officers,
Sure.
where he was a guest speaker,
Yeah.
and that was the first time I'd seen an enlisted at that level be the guest speaker at the ball at that level, for the MEF. And man, I tell you, Sergeant Major, hearing his speech, I was ready to tackle somebody. I was ready for a football game, but or get into a fight. But yeah, I mean, he was definitely animated, and you could tell that there was a certain amount of bittersweet aspect to it, in that it was going to be his last one in uniform, and
I was there at that ball.
Yeah.
I was my first ball on island, and our second ball. But yeah, and we just you take from other people, and you try to build and improve yourself, and see what you can deliver that maybe someone else didn't deliver, or they delivered well, or you could do better. But no, man, it's been a blessing. Being the MEF Sergeant Majors, I just wanted to be a corporal.
Yeah.
I never thought that someday I would be sitting here talking to you, in Japan at the MEF Sergeant Major's house. I mean, I feel like I'm at Sergeant Major Bonner's house right now.
Right. Yeah, I remember. I met you for the first time at Orlando's house, and you were talking about the ass pain associated with having to move from one side to the other, and I know that wasn't easy, but I can say that we're glad to have you here on Courtney.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I remember you mentioning that night was the fact that we all come from a humble place, right? And to get to a certain point requires a certain amount of dedication, hard work, effort, but you don't get there alone. And we kind of touched on this before we started recording with regard to the procurement or cultivation of strong mentor-mentee relationships. And I mentioned that one of my young sergeants, 2611 now, by the name of, I'm gonna call him out, by Sergeant Brandon Taylor. I encouraged him to reach out to Sergeant Major Mario Fields and establish that relationship. And I gave Sergeant Major Fields a heads up and said, "Hey, I'm going to send this young sergeant your way, and this is the reason why." And he said, "Oh yeah." He was all about it. Yeah, he was all about it. So when they linked up, I asked the sergeant afterwards. I said, "You get?" I said, "Did you get what you paid for?" He says, "I got a whole lot more, Matt Sergeant." But
Mario's like the Force in Star Wars. He's here right now in the room. I can feel it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I felt it necessary to teach that young Marine how to approach his staff and CO leadership outside of me, right? To hear the master sergeant tell him, hey, go talk to that sergeant major one-on-one. Ask him, what do you got on fit reps? What do you got on, PME? What are some of the lessons learned that you've obtained over the years? And a lot of this show is reflected in those lessons that I've gained over the years, and wanting to ensure that the tidbits that come out of a conversation such as this or some of the other ones get distributed out to a wider audience, and so that the young Marines listening, and they're out there, and they're not all enlisted. I've got lieutenants and captains and majors and even lieutenant colonels that have told me that they're part of my subscribe list, that are interested in getting a senior enlisted perspective on the way things are currently. And so, now that you're here at the MEF, what perspective do you bring or facilitates your position, your role, and your billet as you're sitting next to the general?
Several things. So first, I think it's humility of having been a blue collar worker all the way up the ranks. I mean, it may sound like a common sense thing, right? Like, of course, you're enlisted, you earned your way up. Not necessarily. I know, some people that this billet or, a similar level of authority could get to your head. And so you have to be able to remember somebody as young as that Lance Corporal. So luckily for me, as my boss is all about people. He loves taking care of Marines and sailors and families. It's one of his top priorities. So it makes my job a lot easier. It gives me a lot of freedom and leeway to manage and build my own schedule around those things. For example, let's say I meet a Lance Corporal on the street. You name it. This is a true story. I met a Lance Corporal a few months ago on Camp Courtney. She was sitting at the corner of by the theater there, and she looked, head down, didn't look happy, looked depressed. So I pulled over. I just pulled over, walked up to her. Hey, Marine, how are you doing? And she looked at me. She realized who I was. She stood up. I thanked her, and then we sat down. And she was just worried about going to college, and she wasn't at the 2-year mark, so she was not eligible. So I sat down and talked to her for a little while. I said, hey, why don't you come to my office tomorrow, and we can see what we can do for you. So she said, okay. I wasn't sure if she was actually going to show up, even though I'm the MEF Sergeant Major. You just never know, right?
Yeah.
So I had her name and all that, but I didn't bother her. So I put her name on the MEF CG schedule on my portion. And it shot out. It goes out every evening. So now there's this Lance Corporal on there coming to see the MEF Sergeant Major. And I didn't tell anybody in the chain of command. And normally I would, but she wasn't in trouble. And it said on there, tuition assistance discussion. So why do I tell that story? Because I think it's my responsibility to highlight everyday people around me. Because I'm in the position to have that ability to showcase people. I really like doing that. I like putting a Lance Corporal, or Sergeant on the schedule, sitting down with the MEF Sergeant Major. Not because it's me, but it's their moment of fame. It's their moment of highlight, or even their opportunity to have one-on-one discussion with me.
Right. And not just necessarily Mario, but the MEF Sergeant Major billet office position. Right. That makes a lot of sense.
It gives them credibility.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I've received several emails from people that, not even just the Marines, but their chain of command or others, their friends, Sergeant Majors, you don't know me. My name's Lance Corporal Smugatelli. I want to thank you for bringing in Lance Corporal Jones because she was really stressed out about X, Y, or Z.
Right.
So, that's important to me. Just always stopping and looking at people in the eyes when somebody, it's never a convenient time for me to talk to anybody.
Of course.
It just isn't, because my schedule is full every day, all day.
Yeah.
Including the evenings. And so having the discipline, the patience, and the genuine interest in every single person that responds to you, reaches out to you, and says something to you, even if it's a greeting. I will be in a full-fledged conversation in a hallway with a bunch of senior leaders, and a young Marine will walk by and say, hey, Sergeant Major, I hear it, but because I'm in conversation, it doesn't register till about 2 seconds later.
Right.
Maybe even a second. I will stop. I've chased Marines down. I said, hey, Marine, thank you. Have a good day. And then I'll come back. I don't care who it is. even the boss, if I'm talking to the 3-star general, he or I will both stop and acknowledge that Marine. So I think little things like that is when you get to a position of influence is people need to know that it hasn't gone to your head. You are a genuine person, and you're just reachable at all times. And that's how you earn the trust, loyalty, and respect of your Marines, just by simply caring and providing a something as simple as an ear for them to say something to you on. And I take a lot of pride in that. I'm told that that's what Marines like about me, is that I'm very easy to speak to.
So I'll tell you, or I'll give you what Sergeant Major Fields asked me to ask you right now.
Okay.
On dovetailing off of that, he wanted me to ask you, why do you believe it's important for a senior leader to demonstrate by your example that you value your subordinates regardless of the situation? And so when I read that question, because it was just in text over Messenger, I was asking, are you specifically referring to when or if the subordinate is under the microscope due to like NJP or court martial scenario, or are you speaking from a broader perspective? But I think I'd like to get both perspectives. So you've got a young Marine in trouble. You can't write him off completely, right? There's still due process. He may be innocent, or it may not be as bad as it's being painted. Somebody has to advocate for him and get his perspective, him or her. So how do you balance that? And then from a broader perspective, from Sergeant Major Fields' own mouth, that you're a leader that treats everyone with dignity, respect, and compassion, regardless of the situation. And you've seen leaders change the way they lead and manage when the subordinate is at their best or worst. So you're known for being consistent, and others need to understand and hear that perspective. So, and I'll leave it to you. How do you handle that, and what has informed your approach over the years towards that particular aspect of leadership?
Yeah. So, wow, that's a very good question. I'm going to tell you a story first.
Sure.
About my NJP.
Okay.
I'm just going to bring it out up front.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the
Can I get you to put the mic a little bit closer to you? Yeah. Perfect.
So in 1994, I won't tell you who this person is just yet because it's part of the story. But 1994, I made a mistake, and I had a female in my room, overslept, genuinely overslept past visiting hours. Back then, the duty would knock on your door at 2200 sharp. It's kind of a courtesy backup in case, right? That never happened. We fell asleep. She was still logged in the barracks. About 1:30, I popped out of the rack like the Exorcist girl, like,
right.
Oh my God. And I looked, and she was right there. We were watching movies, and so I panicked. I was the NCO of the quarter for the entire SSG at the time. So a lot of heat, reputation. I was the role model NCO. I couldn't put it any other way. So I began what became a series of mistakes, right? And this is why my leadership style today is the way it is. First, instead of going to the duty by myself and saying, I'm sorry, I overslept. Look, she's still in the logbook signed in, but there's no sign out time. Right? It would have been a courtesy to him too, because he didn't do his job either, but that's besides the point. Instead, I heard the rifle range people getting up. So I didn't even go out on my own. I wasn't thinking. So I waited till all the rifle range people. So finally around 3 o'clock, 3:30, probably closer to 4, I'm just pacing. She's awake. She's stressed out. I don't know what to do. And then all those people leave around the same time. The PT people are now up, right? Because back then PT was at 5:30, not
right.
Reveille. So that group of people's up, and I'm hearing morning cleanup. The NCOs are walking around. I'm a sergeant. I'm a sergeant, not a corporal.
Okay.
So I've been a sergeant for almost a year, and so I'm really stressed out about this. The PT crowds get out finally around 06, and I was TAD. I was TAD to another command. About 06, I stick my head out. I'm like, man, I'm going to have to sneak her out. Just went about it the wrong way. So I took her out the fire exit. Her car was on that end of the building, or closer to between the duty hut and that building. So she jumps in her car and drives off. Nobody saw me. At least I didn't think so. Went back to my room, changed over, went into work. And about 0730, the company First Sergeant calls my platoon and says, I need to see Sergeant Marquez ASAP. So they tell me go see the First Sergeant. They said, what is it about? I said, I have no idea. And I didn't know. I honestly didn't know. I went over there, reported just like a solid Marine I was.
Right, because you thought you'd gotten away with it.
I did. I thought I got away with it. And that's a good way to put it, because that's exactly what it was. And he said, Sergeant Marquez, I'm going to give you one chance.
Ooh.
And all his question was very broad. He said, what happened last night? I spilled my guts. Didn't read me my rights. Didn't tell me what I was accused of. None of that. And I knew all the legal process. I was a knowledge freaking wizard about anything Marine Corps. I was honest. I told him what happened. I told him exactly why. It was an honest mistake. I told him where I made the mistakes. I said I just panicked. I didn't want my Marines to see the sergeant, the NCO of the year, sneaking a female out. I thought it was wrong. I told him where I could have done wrong or right. And he thanked me. He said, I really appreciate that. Thank you for being honest. He goes, it sounds all legit. It matches with the duty having her still in the barracks. And so 2 days later, I was NJP'd. When I was told that I was only going to get a page 11. Here's the thing about the NJP is I'm standing in the hallway at parade rest, shamed, because everybody's walking by. Everybody knows who you are.
Yeah.
It's battalion NJP. And it had nothing to do with how good I was as a sergeant and all that. It was because I was the NCO of the quarter, because I should have known better.
Yeah.
Because I had the ultimate in judgment, at least in their opinion. So I was standing tall, and I reported, went through the whole NJP process. I explained my story again, but I took responsibility. I said I was sorry. I understand why me getting in trouble is a problem. Well, there was a knock on the door right before that, before they sounded punishment. And I heard a bunch of steps come in, like 20, 15, I don't know how many people. But sort of staff NCOs request permission to something. Every staff NCO in my company came to my NJP. And I get emotional about this.
You should.
And they all said something on my behalf that day. I still got NJP'd. Everything was kind of suspended. I wasn't reduced, and I was put back to work. And all because every single staff NCO in my company came to fight for me, because they knew it was an honest mistake.
Yeah.
And man, I tell you, I get really choked up about that. But that lady's my wife today of 24 years.
Okay.
and I wear her out all the time for getting me in JP. But she's been totally worth it. And but back to your original question is, so that had a real dramatic impact on me on how was I going to lead? What is my personality? What am I going to focus on? And it's always been about people, taking care of people, just being genuine, being approachable, being hard but fair consistently, no matter what. When I went to the drill field, I was comfortable. I was very successful. I was DA of the year. There was a lot of other accolades I received. But when I left the drill field, I was glad, because that wasn't me. I wasn't a yeller and screamer. But I did very well while I was down there. And so being consistent in how you talk to people. When I got in JP'd and everybody talked to me with compassion, and they took care of me and they picked me right back up and moved me past that point in my career, I never forgot that. So I've always been committed to Marines when they're in trouble, even though I'm very public with staff NCOs, and I say, if you get in trouble, don't expect a lot of, compassion for me. That's not really true. I'm going to take care of them. But I've always looked out for the personal aspect, because, they made a mistake, as bad or as minor as it could be. We're still human beings, and I just have this soft spot in me for people as a Marine that, their respect and loyalty is very important to me, even if they've been in trouble, because those Marines will continue to perform for you. And in the end, we're here as a warfighting organization. I've taken Marines that gotten in trouble, in a lot of trouble, including drugs, to combat. All 4 of my tours, I had Marines that had been in some kind of trouble, and they were probably the finest and some of the best warfighters.
What is it about those Marines?
It's the...
Is that what Chesty Pulley was talking about? Like, take me to the brig.
It is.
I want to see the real Marines.
It is, because, it's about the rogueness. It's about the attitude. It's about just that mindset of going against the grain, going against the system. And those are the kind of guys you need too. I mean, you need the good ones too that don't get in trouble. But those Marines, my own experience in combat, that's why they joined. And maybe they don't have the discipline to be like, you and I we're always staying out of trouble for the most part.
Yeah, for the most part.
But we need them, man, and they perform flawlessly out there. I mean, for the most part, and I've never had any problems with those guys. But it's those Marines too that they're a part of the Marine Corps. They're part of our fabric. You cannot. You and I both have a mentor, whatever that image is, and they're not the same. Your mentor may be 100 times better than mine, but in my eyes, my mentor is the best mentor in the whole world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So just like with our good and bad Marines, and I won't say bad Marines, but with our challenged Marines, they too have different standards of.
Let's say imperfect.
Right. And they're only going to get so good. And you know what? If they do their 4 years, that is really the goal.
Right.
That's where I believe is getting every Marine to the end of their tour.
So in Kevin Simmons' episode, he talks about that documentary that PBS made about the Marine Corps. And one of the things that's highlighted is, we've got 2 missions: win battles, not wars, but battles,
yep.
Right? And make Marines.
Make Marines, that's right.
And, what is it about our service culture that is unique to you, that's kept you in for as long as you've been in? You've dedicated your life to this.
Yeah, almost 30 years, 29 years right now. So.
And you joined when you were how old?
I was 18.
Right.
Turned 19 in boot camp.
So you've easily got more time in than out.
Yeah.
Why did you stay in? Why? What is it about this organization that's retained you over the years?
Bottom line is I believe what we stand for. Ethically, morally, as a war fighter, I believe in the fitness, both spiritual and physical. I believe that the nation needs a Marine Corps. They don't have to have us. I really believe that. I believe in our customs and courtesies and the impact we have on people. What I believe the most, other than war fighting, is that we are an institution that gives back. I mean, absolutely. I've been a volunteer my entire career, and it started in the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. It started as a brand new PFC, private, really. And I learned that in the Marine Corps more than anything. My parents taught me that growing up, but when I joined the Marine Corps, I finally had the opportunity to start giving back. I had my own paycheck. I had my own time. I was afforded the opportunity to travel the world. And so I saw very, very poor nations, poor countries, people across the world in poverty tenfold worse than what I've ever seen in America. And America has its problems, but nothing like the rest of the world, not even close. So the ability to have life-changing impact consistently, not just going to war, but more the life-saving aspect of being a Marine has really connected to me and touched my heart. You may or may not know, I think you do, but I've served in the first earthquake in Japan in Kobe in 1995. That was tragic. I was a sergeant right after I got NJP'd, actually.
Okay.
I've served in the Kobe earthquake, and 6,000 plus people died in that, most of them crushed and burned alive because they couldn't be rescued by Japanese emergency services, and they wouldn't take American help initially. And then later on, I was in Tomodachi here in 2011, and I got to see an even worse tragedy. But so all those things, And
what happened in Tomodachi?
Tomodachi is the tsunami, nuclear reactor meltdown, and the 9.0 earthquake. I mean, the triple whammy. And I was in the USFJ headquarters in Tokyo as the reactor's melting down. I was a sergeant major, and I'm watching people mildly and calmly start to know not what the hell to do, because nobody expects a nuclear reactor to melt down.
Right.
And, oh, by the way, we don't have any experts on that, really, except for in the submarine community in the Navy. That was the closest thing we could come up with. So I'm getting off the topic, but the Marine Corps' ability to impact lives for really, really genuine reasons is why I stay. Like I told you, saving lives, Toys for Tots, Fleet Week, all those little things, Comrel, Single Marine Program. It's all the other stuff in addition to warfighting. Warfighting is a given. I believe in it. Right. I'm continuously training for it. I'm holding my people accountable to it. What can I do better? I'm always worried about warfighting because we can never be doing enough,
So for me, like in the last 19 years, I've seen a paradigm shift as it pertains to the value we place on family readiness, and the understanding that, and it really kind of presented itself for me, at least within my awareness and consciences, during when we retrograded back from OIF2, and we started to place, a significant amount of resources, time, effort, and energy in ensuring that these Marines were okay, and that you had these required briefings that you had to go to, and they were seeking to pull us out individually to talk to us one-on-one to make sure that we were all right. And that was part of Nerd Battalion, Radio Battalion.
Yeah.
And so, for us, there were a few of us that came back with cars. Not all of us. I mean, some of us were subjected to a significant amount of sustained mortar, artillery rounds, and whatnot. But some of us, myself included, we came across what we teach at boot camp: unnerving sights and sounds.
Yeah.
And my team was no different from many others in that aspect. But for me, I was somewhat inoculated from it due to the fact that growing up in Texas, gang violence, gun violence, suicides, some homicides, taking place at the adolescent level. 16, 17-year-old good friends of mine were being buried early on in my life, and in a way, it sort of prepared me for that. Good, bad, or indifferent. But we now, I think we take a better approach than we did before. What do you think was the shifting or the pivotal moment that allowed that to happen, that culture shift, so that we started to place that value on the individual human being in uniform, and not just looking at the individual as just a Marine, a line number, but also looking at that Marine's family?
So several parts to this question. I think if you look back before OIF, before the war in Iraq started, we had a very hardcore garrison. If you get to a MEU, you're the bomb,
right.
And that was about the extent of very rare combat experience. So we trained a lot. I think we did a fairly good job based on the mentality and things that we had our exposure back then, and just the way the Marine Corps was. But I think that it took a war, honestly, to put people into severe conditions, like you said. I mean, I remember as a gunny before OIF1 saying, "Man, we need a good war to fix this Marine Corps." I remember saying that to myself and to a couple of my friends. And what I meant with that is I was seeing issues with discipline. I was seeing issues with lack of focus on people believing in being Marines and
right.
what they really stood for and why they served. And so I was frustrated. I was coming off the drill field. But I think to your example, combat operations is what it took. It took people in mass numbers seeing tragic and just horrendous situations, including their buddies and people around them dying, including myself, to see that the value of life and the people around you, while you have them, you got to take care of them. I mean, that's the bottom line. You got to prepare them. You got to get them ready. And then if they go, at least in your heart, you hope that you did everything for them, especially if you're in charge.
Right. Yeah, you touch on a key element of a previous interview, where me and the guest, and I can't remember which one it is off the top of my head, but we talked about the temporal aspect of our interaction with our subordinates. Yep. You've only got that young Marine with you for a finite period of time, to either he PCSs or you PCS. And there are some I guess, some aspects of leadership that will be universal. There are some Marines that will always be my gunny.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And good, bad, or indifferent. That's just the way it is. But we only have them for a finite period of time, and so in that time, in that window of opportunity, you've got to make the most of it to ensure that you do right by that Marine, because of the fact that he's been entrusted to us. And Sergeant Major Garcia touched on this in his episode, was that we owe that young Marine as well as his family to do right by them.
That's right.
And sometimes we can lose sight of that, unfortunately. But One of the other things that sets us apart, though, is that we fight like soldiers, but we come from the sea, and so there's that little bit of Army, little bit of Navy aspect to us. So in your time at in the almost 30 years that you've been in, how have you approached those joint relationships, and which ones what are some of the examples of some of your most memorable experiences with our brothers and sisters in arms from other services?
Yeah. So, the Marine Corps was probably the last to take on the joint world and embrace it. Our officers have always served in joint billets. It's part of their promotion process, at least up to getting to the general officer level. It's part of their roadmap. But for enlisted guys, very rare few guys ever serve joint. My first experience was in Pasco Pier, on Pasco Pier in Korea in 1994. It was one of the MPF offloads that we were doing, a ship offload. And I was platoon sergeant Marquez out there, and we were offloading the MV Lopez. And we had a platoon of soldiers, Army guys. And I was a sergeant. I was like, what the heck are these guys doing here? It was new. I'd never worked with them. I'd always seen them. I didn't mean that in a negative way, but it was just weird, right? And everybody was acting out kind of physically. You could see it.
What do you mean by that? Acting out how?
Well, they were just standoffish. They were looking at them.
Their body posture.
They were mad dogging them. Like stay back on the block. You're like, you're looking at some guys in your neighborhood. You don't belong here. Right? Yeah. Kind of thing.
You lost?
Well, yeah. So I ended up.
No, like the look that they're giving you, like, are you lost? What are you doing around here?
Yeah. This is the wrong neighborhood, vato. But so what I did is, I was the platoon sergeant. I had 60 Marines, and I went over there, and I remember I was in coveralls because it was greasy, it was dirty, it was hot, and in North Korea was acting up back then. It was very important, sensitive time. So I walked over there and I just introduced myself. I didn't understand all of the ranks, but I kind of knew, and talked to one of the sergeants. He happened to be like the guide or something, their equivalent. And then we did a little NCO call later. We all met. We had some beers because we had beers every night at the beer tent right on the pier.
Okay.
And that really made a difference. I'm not taking credit for that, but I've always tried to reach out, especially in joint scenarios. So that was my first exposure. Fast forward, when I was a company first sergeant, I was an infantry company first sergeant, one of the best jobs I've ever had. 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, the Walking Dead. World-renowned, historically significant battalion. I stood them back up in 2005, deployed with a company to Iraq, north of Baghdad to the Diyala province. And we were attached to the Army. The only Marines in a battalion in an organization of several thousand soldiers. And I tell you, it was tough. It was contentious. We're going to keep the Marines inside the perimeter. We're going to take all the cool missions. So it was really, really challenging. But that's kind of what the Marine Corps signed up for.
Right.
Because it was an RAOR. We were augmenting a special mission. And so we were kind of relegated to doing some of the more menial security stuff until Sergeant Major Kent and who was it? General Sattler from FCG came over and said, you need to put the Marines on the road. We train these guys for combat, and you have them in towers and ECPs.
Right.
So we did that. We got out, but
it's kind of like reminiscent of the situation in Belleau Wood, where the Marines were kind of put in the rear guard or off-site, and then they ended up being the brunt of the
and I tell you,
conflict.
That was what happened with us. Once they put us out there, the enemy was not as successful, although they tried. We got IED'd six times my last week as we were getting on helicopters to come home.
Wow. And
man, but the relationship was a little bit tough. What kept us going was my relationship with the command sergeant major, my relationship with my staff NCOs and their officers, because the junior Marines are going to follow what you establish. But it was really during that tour that I began to embrace and understand and accept that other services just have their own culture. We just need to be professional. We just need to make it happen. Because when you act out of what Marines should be doing, it makes the Marine Corps look bad.
Right.
No matter what you do, if you don't get along with another service, if you have a problem with them,
Yeah.
in the end, the Marine Corps looks bad. And that's what we represent. And today I have friends all over the globe. I was stationed in Bahrain. I think you know that, for almost 3 years. And I wasn't a joint billet, but I was on a Navy base, and it was all special ops guys. It was joint.
Right.
Man, it was a great tour. One of my favorite tours. And it was all joint. And now I'm a big fan of joint. If somebody told me today, hey, you want to be the CENTCOM Sergeant Major or something joint, I would jump on it in a heartbeat. I'm a fan of joint. I love being with Marines. I'd want Marines around me. But yeah, absolutely. Joint is very important now, and the Marine Corps has benefited from that. Look at MARSOC. They have more credibility now.
Right.
MARSOC has probably been one of the tools that has caused us to be more accepted, whether we like that or not. I think that's how we've morphed into a modern Marine Corps.
So for the 2600s, which is the predominance of the Top Game audience, we start off, a lot of us, in those joint environments. For the linguists, such as myself, our first school is the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, Presidio Monterey. And so, underneath the umbrella of the Army's position there, you've got all shapes, sizes, colors, and the Naval Postgraduate School is right down the road. So that has a mixture of officers, not just all naval officers and Marines that are there. And so you have that good mix initially, right? And then for us, our follow-on assignment being or training being at Goodfellow Air Force Base, you get that side of the coin. And when I was going through, like around 2002 timeframe, the Marines and the Navy were consolidated into one course. The Army and the Air Force were consolidated in their course. And so you got a lot of one-on-one time with the Navy. And my relationship with the Navy was such that nobody picks on the Navy but me, right? And we kind of had that, that brotherhood with our blue suiters, and that was a lot of fun. But later on, I got to do tours within the DIA as well as the NSA, and in those environments, you had everything from coasties to the National Guard, and then you have civilian contractors and civilian employees, and so being in those environments gave me, at least, an opportunity to understand what makes us unique, what makes us special, but then also what you kind of have to put to the side, right? And for me, I never took offense when, as a gunny, a soldier or someone else called me sergeant,
right?
Because they weren't being disrespectful. They didn't know. And so if it was really important to me, which it really wasn't, I would address it. But when it came down to it, and I had that young individual, subordinate or not, colleague, peer, one-on-one, then I would address it. But I've seen some of my peers in those environments just go completely high and to the right. You will refer to me as gunnery sergeant. They didn't allow for certain individuals to call them gunny even. And, I had to pull it, peer-to-peer aside and say, hey, is this the approach that we really want to take? Yeah. Sometimes it's okay to kind of shed that skin just a little bit. And I'm not saying you change who you are or what makes us or you valuable to the accomplishment of the mission, but there's certain battles worth fighting. There's others that aren't.
If I may, that's a very good comment, because I've run into that several times, especially when I was in Bahrain. I've had people call me, Master, Sergeant, Corporal. I don't even know. Some of the ranks I've been called, I just laugh. You just kind of giggle and you move on. But I think that comes with maturity too. As you get older.
I think you're right. I think that's probably what it is.
That's part of it. But also, as Marines, we have to realize that some things only work in the Marine Corps.
It's true.
Part of our culture. Don't be so hard up about something publicly when you're in a joint world if it's not worth a clash or embarrassment. Most people know Marines are Marines.
Right.
They know we're disciplined. When they think of a Marine, they think of a warfighter, they think of a disciplinarian, they think of a PT stud. And honestly, today, the image of Marines is much more intellectual than I think when you and I first joined. I'm not saying...
Muscles are required.
Yeah, that's right. You gotta have a degree now.
Intelligence not essential.
Yeah, so you're right. we've morphed into a modern day Marine Corps. I mean, there's a reason that Secretary Mattis and Chief of Staff Kelly and others are where they are today. Those gentlemen are very well read. They're very intelligent. They're well spoken. They're highly respected, not just in the Marine Corps, but across the DoD and by civilian community. So I think we've just become better at being intelligent, smarter. But we've also become better at integrating into the joint world and knowing when to not be a Marine, when being a Marine is a little over the top.
Yeah, and I've been guilty of that once or twice. We had the way they had things set up in our site in San Antonio. There were these little caves that you could duck into.
Yeah.
It was very much reminiscent of what you would imagine or see in Silicon Valley, where you have this open architecture and all this collaborative space and couches here and sofas there and little VTC room right there, but all these windows around. So it was very open, and the conference rooms became contested
ground.
Yeah, contested ground. Exact contested territory.
Yeah,
and so you had to reserve it to ensure that there wasn't any scheduling conflicts. And we were getting towards the tail end of an ops brief with my team leaders. I was ops chief for a little over 100 personnel.
Yeah.
In our section, and so getting updates from my subordinate leaders, and we were running a little over time, or I would say we were coming close to being in of our time. I think we still had like 2 or 3 minutes left, and they were the incoming leadership were a bunch of Navy chiefs, master chiefs, senior chiefs, and chiefs, and one of them pokes his head in and he says, "Hey, y'all about done, huh?" And the chief that worked with me he was kind of like I was ops chief. He was the senior enlisted, right? So we had those. We were both E7s, but we had different roles. So like leadership. He was kind of like the first sergeant. I was the master sergeant.
Yeah.
And so he kind of looked at me and he saw where I was headed, like mentally, like I think he saw my eyes turn red.
You snapped.
And he put his arm. He's like, "Nah, Sam." He says, I got this. And he went out, chief to senior chief.
Yeah.
He handled it and said, and we come out and then of course the senior chief doesn't leave that alone. He's like, next time y'all need to be a little bit more mindful of y'all's time. And I started to come off the chain at that point in time, but fortunately I kept it professional, and the chief was there to kind of keep me honest and keep me clean, because it could have got ugly.
Yeah.
And we have a tendency sometimes to be overly aggressive, not only with one another but with others, and there's a point in time where that's required. You need to be able to stand your ground, hold your own, and this is definitely not the place for a timid soul, especially in a position of leadership. So how do you manage that? As the MEF Sergeant Major, there's not a lot of, at least from the enlisted side, there's not a lot of peers for you. There are, but from the billet perspective, how do you handle that?
Yeah. So are you referring to more, how do I control my
interpersonal conflict?
Yeah.
And maintaining it professionally, and when do you what is a trigger for you to go weapons hot?
Yeah, that's a good question. I go out of my way to maintain complete control of my emotions, especially in meetings, in public. I try not to yell. If you ever disappoint me, I will tell you disappointed me, or you will see me just like turn my eyes away from you in a very disappointed way, not disrespectfully, or I will say, I'm disappointed. And that's all I'm going to say. And I've had Marines tell me, "Oh my God, he told me he was disappointed. It was the end of the world for them." I'm talking senior staff NCOs, right?
Right.
But interpersonal conflict, I don't like conflict. I am one of those guys that believes everybody should get along. Work should be harmonious, Should be a very positive vibe. Should be a positive ambiance. The morale should be high. Everybody should be taken care of. Everything should just go right. I'm probably the guy that lives in the dream world 90% of the time, but I'm always pursuing that goal. So I don't like conflict. I don't, and it's just my personality. I don't know why. Probably because I grew up in a very kind of hostile childhood. My parents argued a lot, and I just, I don't know if it reminds me of that or it's just something I didn't like, right? So
Right.
I try to live in a harmonious surrounding, and that includes work. You're right. I don't have peers when it comes to billet. There's 8 other guys that work at the 3-star level, and then there's Sergeant Major Marine Corps. Everybody else, there's 500 Sergeants Major, eight of us at the 3-star level or above. And there is a perception that there's a pecking order, and I try not to act that way. I try not to treat any of my Sergeants Majors or Master Gunnies or anybody, like they're below me. I just try to treat them as peers. But there comes a point in time where I've had to say, you're done. Whatever the case, people have screwed up. I've had to tell people to stop talking, whatever the case, because a lot of times you're right. People wear their emotions on their sleeves, and that's a sign of immaturity at some point. No matter how passionate you are about something,
Right.
at some point that is a weakness and a sign of you don't have the ability to assess and judge the situation and react accordingly. And so I'm very sensitive about that topic. I always try to do that. Recently, I kind of overreacted on an email. They tell you don't send an email before you send it. Well, I failed to have somebody read my email, and it was something small, minute, but I kind of pissed off a lieutenant colonel. But you send a Master Sergeant Major an email, not call him first, and then it's kind of borderline standoffish in the way you present yourself. I'm going to respond to you. I don't ever say I'm the Master Sergeant Major. I'm just going to take action. And so I was tested recently on that and by a lieutenant colonel, and I was not happy about it. Still has not responded to my other email. So I just left it alone. I went to his boss. But yeah, it's emotions are always present, even in my world. Emotions take a hectic toll on people below you when you are somebody in a really, really senior position. That's how command climate falls apart. That is how you get things with COs that are relieved or sergeant majors that are relieved because of a very bad just command climate. And so it's very important to me that I maintain a positive attitude, always be aware. I think the best advice I can give on this subject is we all have to be mature and aware enough to always be evaluating ourselves. I'm always asking people, hey, what do you think about this? How did I do on that? What do you think? I really care what people think. Like if I give a speech, I don't want people to say you did a good job. I just want people to say, that was good. I like how you hit on this, this, and that. Maybe you could have hit on this. I want to be critiqued. Some people ask just to see if they look good. And
do you ever find that it's hard for some individuals to give you an honest assessment of your performance or execution of a speech in that example?
I do. I find I worry that people don't want to tell me the truth if they thought it was anything less than what they expected because I'm the MEF Sergeant Major or because I was the MAW Sergeant Major. When I do speeches, I never repeat a speech. So my first year in the MAW, 2015, I spoke at 12 balls. So I wrote 12 speeches, and they were all like within 2 weeks. Everything I do is original. I try to not copy anything, repeat anything. Some stuff I will if it's a certain kind of message, but yeah. So the reason I don't want to repeat speeches is because I want to tailor what I'm talking about to that specific organization or group. So I'm always looking for feedback because every time it's new for me. It's not the same product. I don't have a chance to improve on a product because I have one shot to make an impression on Group X with that one speech that I wrote just for them.
Is that what informed that approach? Is that you wanted to ensure that the message is tailored, designed for that group?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, it could be an aviation.
But what if there's some good content from one speech? And you
I've taken small bits, but very little. What I do is I write most speeches. I write them, and then I'll just read them over and over. My wife will usually drive me to an event. I'm in the passenger seat. I'm reading it, writing it, and then all I'll do is I'll highlight a couple words. I'll put it on the podium, and then I'll just refer to it. But I memorize it, not perfectly, but yeah, it's all about, for me, it's all about making sure I meet that organization's
Right.
needs and what they want to hear, what they would want to hear from me, because it's important for me to tailor myself to them. Which
Yeah.
goes back to one of your earlier questions: is are you consistent, or have you adjusted your leadership style? I'm consistent in how I am as a person, as a Marine Sergeant Major, but I will adjust what I say and what I do to an organization, because I think it's important. Not every organization is the same. I can even gauge if a unit's morale is okay, or if it's awesome, or if it's really low, and I will adjust myself instantly to that vibe, because you have to. I'm still being Mario. I'm still being,
Right.
Marquez, the MEF guy, but I don't mind adjusting. You have to. You have to have that skill
Right.
set.
So Liz has 20 plus years in education. And she's followed me all over the globe and has taught in a bunch of different school districts. Had to set up and tear down classes mid-school year. And, all the different schools that she's taught at and the classrooms that she's been in, she can walk into a classroom and there be no one present. And she can almost like see the amount of education or learning
That's
real
happening.
learning that's taking place in that room.
Wow.
Just by just walking into the space.
Yeah.
And so I would imagine with pretty much 30 years in the Marine Corps that you can walk into a unit and see where that's at. But of course, it's not an empty unit. You see the individuals and how they address each other, interact with one another, how they're, the state of their uniform, the level of camaraderie. What are some of the indications that really stick out the most to you, and how do you begin to approach that from your position as senior enlisted of the MEF when you go to some of these MSCs and whatnot?
So I'm always cautious about the well-intentioned but potential, what's the word? Facade. Excuse me. That the commands will put on me or the CG,
Right.
because we're
the dog
visiting
and pony show.
the dog and pony, right? So I look past that. I look right through that. First 5 minutes, if a command is in what condition. State of police is obviously important.
It would seem to me that the command that doesn't do that already sticks out head and shoulders above the other commands, because this is who we are, Sergeant Major or Sir or General or whatever. We're not going to change anything. This is the normal commander's update brief that we always get.
Yep, that's right.
You're welcome to join us, or we can escort you elsewhere, whatever you want to see.
That is exactly what I feel, and you know when you're welcomed in
Right.
command. If the Marines know you, if the Marines go up to you and they look at your face and they say, "Hey, Sergeant Major," they're either well prepared, which is not really the case. Not well prepared by the command. I mean, well prepared because they care and they know who you are and they're excited to see you. The state of police is important. The way the Marines conduct themselves, the amount of leaders that actually talk to you, also, in addition to young Marines, all those things to me are indicators. Marines shouldn't be scared to come up and talk to me. But I also look at it this way: if I go to a command, and I know I have not been there in a long time, part of that is my fault.
Okay.
Because all they see is a photo on the wall.
Yeah.
If I don't get off my butt and get down to as many commands as possible, which is really hard, we got over 50 commands in this map.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And we're spread across the Pacific.
Yeah, we are. And so when I go to a command and I know they're a good command, and not all the Marines know me, I will tell them to their face, "Hey, I'm sorry I haven't been here enough. You don't know me because I haven't been here enough to see you. So, but now you see me." I said, "This is who I am," and then we talk, or we'll do whatever. But yeah, I mean, the good commands will stand out naturally. It's a good natural vibe. They're squared away. Everybody talks to you. You can just feel the happiness in a command. Other commands, they're avoiding all senior leaders. Nobody's really talking.
Like kick puppies. They don't even want to make eye contact.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. they just, and there are not that many of those.
Right.
But the ones that are there, or the ones you end up hearing about, is the ones where you saw signs of that kind of thing. So, but it's just an inherent trait that you pick up on as somebody who's been around, like your wife, who's been doing it for a long time. All those signs stick out. And the best part about it is that, just like mom and dad, nobody wants to listen to you. So when you give them advice and you tell them this is where you're headed, and then that's what ends up happening, all I can say is, "I told you." You know what I mean? So, because it's all about helping those organizations understand what the image of them is. I try not to do that a lot, but I try to tell the MSc SARS major, hey, you might want to help this organization. I think they could use a little bit of love. It's all about helping them succeed, not prevent them from getting fired. Two
Right.
different things. Yeah. So
that the Marines ultimately receive the leadership and the command climate that they deserve.
yeah,
That makes a lot of sense.
they all join for a reason, and we lose too many Marines every year because of, but the command's not giving the attention and professional relevance that they join for, personal relevance that they join for to accomplish their goals and tasks and achieve their personal and professional roadmaps.
Sergeant Major Garcia said that. He said, "Keep the promise." Right? Somebody that recruiter made a promise to that young Marine, and by extension, that Marine's family, and we have to ensure that we hold up to our word.
Yeah.
When somebody was laying out those tabs in front of them. So we talked about making Marines win in battles, but another key element of who we are as a warfighting organization is our capability to innovate, right? And ever since I came in, it was improvise, adapt, overcome. But innovation is something different from my perspective. And we have, under General Neller in Dunford, released the future operational environment, the Marine Corps operating concept, and the message to the force, and all of these documents that have come out from our leadership, our most senior leadership. They're looking at crowdsourcing to an extent the path forward in a very information centric environment. One of the things that I've noticed is that we're unwilling to provide those tools for those young Marines to do so. And we've identified there's a requirement, and we know we have the manpower to do it. These young Marines are smart as hell, Sergeant Major.
Yeah.
But we're not giving them the tools, and we're kind of expecting them to bring their own tools to the fight. And never would we ask the young Marines to go down to Walmart or some gun store and pick up the weapons and ammo that they would need for combat. But we're kind of expecting them to do that when it comes to the programming languages that we're asking these young Marines to learn, or the language that we're asking these young Marines to attain and retain, and other high demand, low density skill sets such as these, where we're expecting them to kind of do it out of hide. What could we be doing differently to ensure that those aspects or those elements are in place in order to more effectively leverage that young Lance Corporal that's in the barracks right up the road, that's teaching himself Java or Objective-C or C# in order to develop a skill set that we haven't necessarily learned how to leverage appropriately.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things I could say about that, and this is really fundamental for me. But there's a reason we tell the staff NCOs to get to the barracks. Some of our Marines are doing some of their best work after hours on their own time, just like you said. Bottom line is, if there's no support from the Master Gunner Sergeant, Master Sergeant, the senior staff NCOs, all the staff NCOs, but specifically the E9s, the E8s and 9s, so they can speak on behalf and give more credibility to what that young Marine's doing, even if the Marine writes the product, right? Or if he does the product, it's much harder to get that idea across. When you have buy-in from your staff NCOs, even the Sergeant Major, if it's a technical thing, man, that thing will take off running. You're right. One of our biggest crutches, and it remains today, is that the Marine Corps likes to do more with less. You look back at World War II and Korean War, when you talk about being different and making change, we used to recruit movie stars, broadcasters, sports stars, and depend on colonel, went right to combat. If we could do that in combat, why can't we adjust the Marine Corps today to embrace significant change. And I think we're getting there under General Neller. He's pushing really hard. He's had hundreds of initiatives. We probably have gotten the furthest, I think, just from my exposure to General Neller. I used to work for General Neller in the Middle East 2 jobs ago. We've probably gotten the furthest along with this commandant than any other commandant in recent times when it comes to embracing advanced technology, innovation. There's innovation labs where NCOs are developing drones. So there's a little bit of that, but it's very limited.
Right.
So the Marine Corps Center for, it's under SysCom, so Systems Command, under McCitic. They actually do have an innovation lab department. I can probably get more information on that for you, but we just don't do a good job about getting the word out.
Yeah.
We don't do a good job about teaching when was the last time you saw a corporal or sergeant write and get published in the Gazette? I don't think I've ever seen that. I mean, you guys like you and I do it all the time. We had lieutenants and majors and captains, but
right.
Let's get some of our young guys published. Let's help them write those articles. I mean, it goes back to what I said about me bringing somebody in and putting them on the calendar at the MEF Sergeant Major's office. It's the same thing. I think as a community of staff NCOs, because this is an enlisted forum for the most part, even though you do have officers on here, we have to do a better job about highlighting our young talent. Man, what got me to Sergeant Major today was my efforts as a sergeant, but more like at the NJP, the support of my staff NCOs giving me credibility, because it takes credibility to be listened to.
Right.
And the Marines we need to find those Marines. We need to highlight them. We need to write the point papers. We need to do all the work for them sometimes to get them where they need to go. And then after that, we just kind of let them go. They'll get guided by the process. And I think we're doing a lot better in innovation than what it may appear to be, but we have a long way to go. And it's going to take enlisted leadership to push that past the point where we're taken more seriously.
One of the things that I had drafted up a while back, not too long after I arrived here, was for Disruptive Innovation Lab. And what we were trying to do is get a space set up with maybe 10 or so workstations, full on gaming PCs, and put them in force on force to exercise as many OODA loops as possible. But we also wanted to use it as like a cyber force on force competition, to where I set up my network, you and your team set up theirs, and then at a certain point in time we connect the 2 networks and go. You defend your network and attack mine, and vice versa. But then the other thing was we wanted to provide them with all the software development kits necessary to start to generate operationally minded applications and programs or modifications to current software solutions that were specifically made or developed with the PACOM AOR at the front of their brain housing group, and then take those Marines and whatever it is that they develop and allow them to go out to ITSEC, the Inter-Service Industry Training Simulation and Education Conference, to present and compete in the military category. And the overwhelming response was you can't buy commercial off-the-shelf computers. It's got to be connected to the network. And well, why? That's a sacred cow. And for me, having sat down at the Marine Corps Warfighting Labs Innovation Symposium and listened to General Neller speak, he told us there are no sacred cows. You have to be willing to challenge the system.
That's right.
We can't innovate if we continue to hold on to these old traditions, standards, objectives without challenging. We have to, as leaders, we have to ask why. And why can't we do this in order to achieve this change? And there may be some hard no's, but these Marines are on their own laptops doing this, but if we had a space next to the S&P room where they could walk in and there's 10 battle stations fully kitted out with the software development kits, and they've got the HTC Vive goggles on, and they're developing software solutions that are relevant to our position here on the forward edge of the battle space, or FIBA, why not? Why? Because and ultimately, you're only looking at not even $100,000, And in the course of the MEF,
Right.
that's a drop in the bucket.
It is.
In order to, highlight the fact that this type of effort, this type of innovation is exactly what we're looking for. We just came back from a 2-week TNR manual working group where we established getting some right. And for the 2600s, the 2653 MOS is exactly that. The type of Marine that will take an idea or a requirement, an operational requirement, and generate software on demand in order to coalesce data and put it in a light or in a product that is discernible by a warfighter. So explain, Sergeant Major Marquez comes in to our, our tent, concertina wire and everything, and he asks a question. You may not be the technical expert, but can that technical expert, that young technical expert, explain it to you in a way that makes sense and that you can turn around and lead from that new insight. And a lot of times we have this problem with the duality requirement, in that you've got to be that technical expert, but you've also got to be able to speak Marine. And sometimes we have in our community an issue with that, which kind of brings me to one of the questions that one of the master guns has asked. What can we at the nerd battalions, which is what we refer to ourselves as the radio battalions, do to ensure that we're not so maligned by the 8999 community? Because there are a significant number of 8999s that have a low opinion of the radio battalions because of some of the frustrations that they've had while on assignment there.
Yeah. So one, I don't think the radio battalion guys are any different than any other Marines when it comes to being the Marine concept, the whole Marine concept. I think you have a mission to do. I think you understand where you can and cannot deviate from a standard, and only your community knows whether or not you're honorably executing those standards. The E9s in that community absolutely control the level of that happening.
Right.
It's a valuable tool. Radio battalions are highly respected. I don't know if you know Sergeant Major Finneran. He's retired. He was radio battalion back in 2005 timeframe, I think, maybe before that. But one of my mentors, one of my friends, now long since retired, but he could not stop talking about how amazing the radio battalion Marines were. And a lot of times it's not that the battalion has any problems with it. It's the mission set. It's the uniqueness about what you do, the classifications, the things you're allowed to do because it's critical to the MOS. Honestly, I think it's just up to the Marines in the MOS to always show that they genuinely care about being Marines,
right,
when they're not executing specific things that take them away from looking like a Marine, if that happens. Just be a part of everything. Be a part of the mess nights, the other events that we do as traditional Marine units.
We can be insulated with regard to that.
Right.
I've seen that.
Fragmented,
yeah.
Go out in debts, and so
and that's not exclusive just to the 2600s. I've seen the O2s like that. Like when I first got here, I was probably one of the only G2 staff NCOs that showed up to the staff and officer ball. And so I went to two separate balls. And that part kind of didn't sit well with me, because I think that we have an obligation and responsibility to be part of the larger community, to know who the master guns in the 3 shop, in the 4 shop, and and elsewhere across the island. We're comfortable behind the door.
It's the relationships, man.
Right.
And my whole message today, if I had to say anything to the staff NCOs today, relationships across all ranks, enlisted specifically, will always, 99% of the time, overcome any obstacle.
Yeah.
And you did the right thing by being the only G2 guy that went. That was the right thing to do. The ones that didn't go, they're actually hurting their own MOS and the perceptions of their MOS. There are certain MOSs that aren't known to want to participate in things, and all they do is hurt themselves and their own credibility, because it goes back to the joint thing. If I, as a Marine, act a certain way, if I, quote, act a fool, it's the Marine Corps that looks bad. So when a Marine in a certain MOS, or an MOS is known to be a certain way, they can only damage their own credibility potentially for that MOS. But it's guys like you and I who we also have to reach out. The SAR majors, the first sergeants, we have an obligation to learn what that MOS does and figure out how we can get into the MOS, embrace them. Like you said, learn the technical aspects of what they do, be able to talk to it a little bit.
Right.
And give them credibility and show them that you care and you understand that their piece of the Marine Corps is exactly that. And so I was in the wing for 6 years out of my time as a sergeant major, out of almost 11 years. I can speak almost anything wing, and I'm pretty proud about that. When I was in the grunts, I could talk all kinds of grunt stuff. I'm not the duty expert, but it was you, Master Sergeants, Master Gunnies, who helped me get through. And it was, first and foremost, it was the personal relationship. Even more than professional, it was the personal relationship and treating each other like adults, like grown men and women, just being professional, taking care of each other. You know, hey, what do you need? How can I help you? Hey, no, you don't have to do this working, whatever, right? Just getting them out of something once in a while,
right?
Being fair and balanced about how you lead the organization. A lot of that's the sergeant major side of it, but it's important because, you know, the most important counseling as a sergeant major I got was from a mass sergeant in my very first command. And I'll tell you a quick story. MWSS 172, brand new sergeant major, very young sergeant major. I think I had, I don't know, 17, almost 18, just under 18 years in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
I'm already a sergeant major. And coming from 1-9, the grunts.
You sound like Sergeant Major George Garcia.
Yeah, I was on fire, man. I was excited. My first command, it was MWSS 172. Had a formation, just flown in from Camp Lejeune. You know, again, I came from the grunt, so rougher environment,
right.
Of course. Curse word or two doesn't hurt anybody. Well, I came to the wing, and I'm out there, you know, very animated, trying to make an impression, and whatever I did, it just, I thought I was doing okay, but apparently not. After formation's dismissed, I go into my office, and two mass sergeants walk in behind me, two weather guys. One's a big, tall guy.
Meat talkers.
Yeah, meat talk, and I'm thinking, who is this guy, you know? But they asked to speak to me, and so yeah, what's going on, Master? How can I help you? And, you know, I didn't know this guy was a black belt in like 6 different martial arts. By the way. He didn't look like it, so he would have dragged me around the room. But he goes, Sergeant Major, you know, you're the senior enlisted leader in this command. We're really excited about getting you compared to the last guy who just left, who
right.
does not want to go to combat because we were going to Iraq, and I volunteered to go to that unit. And he's like, but, you know, I'm kind of disappointed that you curse as much as you did. He's like, you are the role model for this organization. We expect a lot out of you. And man, I felt this big. So out there in Radio Land, my fingers are about a millimeter apart here. I felt that big. And I still maintain my, you know, bravado and toughness. I was like, well, I appreciate that, Master Sergeant. Thank you very much. Like I never cussed again in a formation since then. Maybe once, right? But that had a severe impact on me. And it takes other people, even of subordinate or junior rank, to keep us straight, keep us honest, keep us fair, balanced. It's the relationship. And from that day on, we went to Iraq with that guy. We needed each other because one of his Marines tried to kill himself. And our relationship was what got us through that tragedy. From the respect iron of him telling me I needed to fix myself. Did it very tactfully. But man, what a lesson learned. As a sergeant major, I was embarrassed. I was disappointed in myself, and I understood exactly what he meant as soon as he opened his mouth.
So let me ask, why is it that within the 89-99 community, there's this constant awareness of a need to move up in the hierarchy?
Yeah.
And why is it seen as being beneath their rank and experience to go back down to the battalion level to be more intimately connected with the Marines?
So probably for a variety of reasons, but I think the first thing I'll tell you is, for example, to work for a colonel, you have to have 3 years time and grade.
Okay.
The reason that was developed because in previous years, Marines that were perceived to be very squared away, advanced for their rank and age, have made mistakes and they just weren't ready to perform. You know, when a Marine picks up Sergeant Major, first sergeant, first thing I tell them is, hey, you need to be prepared to go from what was a pretty sharp captain to a very intelligent and smart in a much different way, lieutenant colonel. And it's so many-fold, right? 5-fold, 10-fold, whatever it is.
Right.
From lieutenant colonel to colonel, it's the same thing. It's a drastic change. So the Marine Corps has recognized that you have to have so many years of experience to work for certain levels, so that you are matching on par the knowledge and experience of your commander, but also complementing it. I mean, there's a reason that a staff sergeant is partnered with a first lieutenant.
Okay.
You're supposed to be the mentor, the advisor, and helping that lieutenant, second lieutenant, first lieutenant, grow up and become a seasoned, solid officer. It's still looked at in that way, but they're a lot closer at the more senior ranks, right? But still, usually sergeants major are senior to their commander in service most of the time. So the perception is not really that you have to shoot up to be at a higher level. Natural progression for our MOS directs that we continue to move up and be put in positions of influence based on the amount of experience and time in service you have, commensurate to the billets. Some people would just not move up. Some people want to stay at the lower levels. But experience sometimes shows that a lot of those, and I'm talking sergeant major, a lot of times those sergeant majors don't want to move up. They don't want responsibility. They don't want to move. There's other things tied into just that they want to stay at a lower level.
Right.
In any organization, normally, naturally, you want to progress and move up into positions of leadership. You should. You should want to be in charge of something. But it shouldn't come across as if you're doing it for the glamour, the glory,
right,
the look at me, any of that.
It should be done with the mindset that you can serve even more. That's or a greater purpose.
That's right.
Or a larger audience.
Yeah. So the way Marquez sees it, that's how I tell my sergeants major in 3MEF. When I go to the sergeant major course, all the brand new sergeants major, I tell them the same thing. This is what I tell them. I say, you need to focus where you're at. Don't worry about where you're going as far as, worried about too much about the future. We will help manage your career. We'll help put you into the billets that you need to be in so you can naturally progress so that by the time you reach your, 30-year mark, if you want to stay to 30 years, you should be in a senior position of leadership. The only problem with that is, there's only 500 sergeants major. There's about
right.
120 06 billets. There's 45 1- and 2-star billets. There is 9 3-star billets, and then you have sergeant major Marine Corps. Everybody else works for lieutenant colonel or major. So as you can see, the stovepipe quickly accelerates, and when you get to the general officer level, the pyramid goes pretty steep. And so people get frustrated because they don't get picked. They compete against other sergeant majors. We actually hold boards. And so sometimes, it's the first time in your career that you're really getting told no, because to make sergeant major or master guns, but we're talking about sergeant majors here, they have a pretty illustrious career.
Right.
They've been the best guy of the best guys, right? But now they're competing against all the best guys out of the whole Marine Corps. And it's the first time when you don't get picked, it's another way of somebody telling you, no, you're not the guy.
Right.
And so it happened to me. It happened to me 4 times. I didn't get the pick. I was too young. I whatever, right?
Right.
But now I'm the sergeant major, and all I can do is try to mold and prepare my sergeant major, give them as much experience and a breadth of topics and a broad range of things, so that, like you said, and talking technical is important to me. I as the MEF sergeant major, I feel that it's very important that I can talk about politics, about geo-military issues, about anything and everything, commerce, everything.
So were you on deck when the DCI was here?
No, I think I was gone. I think I was out of town.
So one of the things that he talked about was the Battle of Signatures.
Yep.
And where we're headed. The audience was mostly 02s, 06s, and 2600s, but it touches on a key aspect of the mock and the FOE, in that tomorrow's fights will involve conditions in which to be detected is to be targeted, is to be killed. But does that necessarily mean as an organization or even as an individual Marine that we just need to go comms dark? Or
yeah.
is there a balance for us to like this project here to leverage the information age in a way that contributes to our lethal velocity as an organization?
Yeah, no, a very important point. So up until probably 2 years ago, I felt that cell phones were going to be the detriment of our existence in combat operations. And
Right.
I mean, I've seen the studies where from satellites, they could pinpoint our locations, you name a unit in the field. I mean, clearly identified us, even though there was camouflage and stuff like that. But today, as
they can do the same thing with the cigarette butt, right?
they do exact same thing, just from
Or how we establish our lay out our tents.
the wire.
The
They
wire,
can pick up the wire,
right?
the
Or
deflection.
the generators, right?
Yeah.
Who's running fluorescent lights,
Right.
in the middle of a jungle?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So all those signatures are already there. You're right. But I've also learned that there's I'm forgetting the word that I'm looking for here, but there's a counter messaging aspect or counter psyops version of misinformation. Our misinformation, outright intentionally putting false signatures out there, confusing the enemy, giving them all this
Decoys.
Absolutely. We did it in World War II. We built fake airplanes. We built fake ships, fake tanks. Entire armies were positioned in other parts of France when we were all actually really in England getting ready to board the ships, right, to come over across the channel. I think the same things apply. It's just now it's a signature world. I do think that we are at risk from people bringing in hidden devices that we can't control. There's enough risk from the devices we have that we have to operate and function as a Marine Corps in combat. If we can just control our personal devices somewhat, then that'll probably help us out a lot. But I'm not smart enough to know what the enemy technologies. China's no longer a near peer, right? I mean, they're considered a peer.
Right.
North Korea probably some to some extent in some ways. Russia for sure. Iran. There's even friends that are peers that are probably collecting on us, I'm sure.
Right.
So, but I don't know if that answers your question, but I do worry about personal devices in a non-controlled environment. But that's just how I've been raised. I don't have the technical aspect of telling you other than because I know my cell phone, I can turn on, find my phone, and people can find me.
Right. So let me ask, are you Android or iPhone?
I'm an iPhone.
Always been or?
So my work phone is a Android. My other phone, personal phone, is an iPhone.
So is that intentional? You want to keep them separate like that or?
No.
Or?
So I used to have a BlackBerry, right? That's just a work issue.
Right.
But I like Apple products. I've always been taught, and maybe I'm wrong, and my experience has proven that less viruses, less threats. I've never had a virus on my Apple products. Everything I own is, iPod, iPad, MacBook, my iPhone. And before this phone, I had the old school little text button simple phones. I didn't really have any smartphones.
The Nokia brick phone?
Yeah, the Nokia brick phone. So
okay.
That's what I use.
What was the first iPod that you bought?
Oh man, it was real heavy. I don't remember the model number, but the thing weighed about a pound.
How big was the storage on it? Do you remember? Like 30 gigs or?
No, it was less. It was like 16, maybe. Maybe.
Yeah.
And it was real heavy, and I remember really heavy wheel, just clicking around.
The click wheel. Yeah.
But man, and then different types of adapters. They change their plug every year.
Yeah.
So it just pisses me off because I have to, you can't break. You got to take care of your equipment because it's very expensive to.
Yeah, definitely. It's like $20 for a new cable.
Yeah.
If you mess it up.
Yeah.
Do you have a MacBook laptop?
I have a MacBook Pro, 15-inch screen
with a touch bar.
It has a touch bar. It's pretty sweet, but
yeah.
I don't use it as much as I should. I use it for college. I use it for music. I still DJ, so I used to DJ when I was young.
What was your DJ name?
Marky Mark.
Marky Mark.
So that's kind of my modern DJ name. And I like everything. So when I want to vent, when I'm not PTing and when I'm doing something else, I'll get on here on a Friday or Saturday night, and I like house music too. So
okay.
I got into house music later, like lounge, the more calm, and I'll just make mixes. I'll go on Spotify, I'll get some new stuff, and I'll sit here and just make some music. It's a way for me to decompress.
What kind of equipment do you use to mix back and forth?
So I don't have any mixers right now. I just use the MacBook. the way the software is now.
What software are you using?
DJ Pro.
DJ Pro.
Yeah.
So Novato? Does that sound?
I'd have to check, but I bought it on at the App Store, and very simple. I mean, it helps you match, music. It helps you. It's very thorough. I mean, it comes with all the other bells and whistles of a DJ. The sounds and the bell and the those type of things. Make it sound like you got a clubhouse going on.
Yeah. Have you been to? Speaking of clubs, have you been to the new enlisted club on Kadena?
I have not. I'm going tonight.
Sergeant Major. I was embarrassed.
Really?
When I walked in there.
Huh. Out of control?
It's amazing. They dropped almost $50 million on that place, from what I understand. But it is exactly the type of facility that should be on any installation here in the Pacific. And, we talked earlier about doing more with less. And to a certain point, I think we're definitely getting diminishing returns on that.
Yeah.
From a facilities and standpoint, family readiness. I'm pretty sure you're tracking. They just closed a pool on McT.
Yep.
And there's a lot of families that are up in arms about it. Understandably, my son Enrique was hired on to be a
lifeguard.
A lifeguard out there, and he was kind of disappointed. And I was like, oh, you can still work on foster. You don't really need the money. He's like, it's not that, Dad. It was just 16, can't have a car. Their liberty is restricted to a certain extent. And it was like one piece of being 16, growing up in America that he could do was be a lifeguard at a pool. It was kind of frustrated about that. But I walked into that club, and like I said, I was embarrassed.
Wow. I'm gonna have to get over and check it out, because they invited me to the grand opening, but I was off island. But
right.
You're right. That's one of the problems we have here is because of the delays in building the new bases and other politics. We continue to suffer financially, fiscally, and one of the areas I'm trying to work on as well is how can I expedite any of the projects that specifically around morale. So I'm always looking for any word, any advice, any hints of delays or the naysayers, within our institution here to make some change. So I'm encouraging everyone to shoot me an email or call me with anything like that. I didn't know the McT pool closed because I'm a swimmer.
Yeah, I think it has something to do with the paint on the pool.
Yeah. Probably chipping off. I remember swimming there last summer when they closed the Courtney pool because it had a leak in it.
Yeah.
So it's unsad. I mean, they're spending $50 million on a club, and we can't even get our pools to work. Yeah.
One of the applications that I've seen before, and I've tried it out, was Native Instruments Tractor Pro. Mm-hmm. Is a good one. There's also Ableton Live. I don't know if you've ever played with that. Serato was the one I was trying to come up with. A good buddy of mine. He DJs on his off time.
Yeah.
He's I've known this guy since we were, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years old. We went to Catholic school together and grew up together. He's a huge Dallas Cowboys fan. Has season tickets, and he'll drive his trailer RV up to the Texas Stadium and set up his DJ equipment, and they'll hang out in the parking lot and barbecue and grill and whatever, and he'll set up his equipment right out there.
Wow.
But I got to watch him practice and work on his craft. But I was surprised to hear that you like to DJ.
Yeah,
and house
fun.
music of all things.
Yeah, house music is specifically lounge, not the real high drum, high tempo stuff, but more the laid back stuff. When I go to the gym now, I just like to get into this mindset,
right?
Because it gets painful as you get older. I mean,
it does.
48 years old, and
I'm 42. I don't feel it yet, and one of the things that still kind of keeps me spry or young is I train jiu-jitsu with a lot of the young gladiators out on Hanson, and then
nice.
we go down to WKO right there right outside of Kadena, and started it with my boys as a way for me to ensure that they could defend themselves.
Oh yeah.
Like I told them, it's not in the cards. You boys aren't going to be big men.
Yeah.
Genetically, you're going to be challenged in that regard.
Fight.
Yeah. So that was the other thing is under my roof, you will know how to defend yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have a tournament going on today. So whenever we wrap up, I was going to head down there and check on my teammates. But I wanted to ask a little bit about your background growing up. You mentioned that there was some conflict with your parents, and that's kind of made you averse to that type of hostile environment. But where did you grow up?
So I was born in Guadalajara, Jalisco State in Mexico in 1970, November 2nd, to be exact. We call it El Día de los Muertos, so Day of the Dead. What a
You're Coco.
Convenient, yeah. I'm Coco. That's right. You've seen the cartoon.
Yeah.
Born in Guadalajara, and I lived there with my parents until I was about just under 4 years old, and then my little brother was about 8 months old. We immigrated to California, 1970.
Legally or illegally?
I think it was legal. I mean, my mom tells me it was legal, so I'm sure it was. But I've had other family members that illegally came across, and people have been crossing across that border for decades on workers programs. We didn't really enforce the border too much until probably the early 1900s 1900s. But anyway, so we came across, and we moved into Compton, California. We lived in Compton, California for I don't know, about 6-7 months. It was, it was all black neighborhood. We were like one of two families there that were Latinos, Mexicans. And then we moved to Lynwood, California, which is another predominantly black neighborhood. We lived there for about a year. And then we moved to a place called Paramount, California, which was, it was mixed. It was Hispanics, Samoans, blacks, whites. It was a little bit of everything, but primarily Hispanics, Samoans. We lived there until 1980. Made a lot of good friendships, and I remember being really sad to move out of that neighborhood because it was a really, really cool set of kids that I used to hang out with. From there, we moved to a place called Hawaiian Gardens, California. Not a lot of palm trees at the time, so I don't know why it was called Hawaiian Gardens, but it was a pretty nice city, middle America type of place, and I really enjoyed growing up there. Eventually, though, as I was getting older, the gangs started moving in, the Mexican mafia moved in, and I graduated out of Artesia High School in 1988. And I was starting to get influenced by that kind of stuff. I wasn't in a gang, but it was cool to dress that way a little bit. And I was the oldest son, so I'm the oldest of four. And I was like, you know what, I got to get out of here. I got to do something different. I was bored. I was an honor graduate out of high school, but I just wasn't satisfied with life in Little Hawaiian Gardens, California. So when Panama kicked off, I remember going to boot camp and joining the Marine Corps because it was the toughest service. I wanted to get away from life. I was tired of being home. I was tired of being told what to do by my parents. So I joined an organization that tells you what to do all the time.
Right.
And man. And I went to boot camp, graduated in January of 1990, and then got sent to MOS school in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. I was a red patcher, landing support specialist. Really cool MOS. We used to blow up stuff and clear LZs and all kinds of neat things. And then got sent to Okinawa. I was mad as hell. I didn't want to go to Okinawa.
There's a lot of people still feel that way.
Well, yeah. And, I wanted to go to Pendleton because that was home. That was close. I thought I was going to be able to go there easily. And so when I showed up to Okinawa, I did not want to be here. And fast forward now, I speak Japanese. I'm married to a Japanese, speak Spanish and English. And
it's like you're home.
And it's like I'm home, and here I am. So that's a little brief summary of me.
So you touched on a key point in that there's a lot of people who get cold feet when it comes to coming out to Okinawa. And, for me, I think it should be a force and function for individuals that aren't dedicated to the organization in the way that we require. We effectively have a third of our warfighting organization forward, focused.
That's right.
Faithful. And if you're only willing to play on the East Coast in North Carolina or in Quantico, or on the West Coast at Pendleton, and you're not willing to come out, drop papers.
Yeah, I agree, and I'll tell you why. I've served in all three MEFs at least 7 years in each. This one happens to be the most.
Right.
I've also served. I lived and was stationed in the Middle East, in addition to the three MEFs. And of course, you count all your deployments in the Middle East. That's another 3 years of time. So I have about 6 years in the Middle East. So when I look at globally assigned, worldwide deployable, have I done my part? You damn right I have. And I expect everybody else to do their part. I have a joke, and this joke is, if I am ever Sergeant Major of the planet, overseas assignments will be mandatory for everyone in the Marine Corps. It just so happens that right now I am on the Commandant Directed Overseas Screening Process Working Group. 3MEF is the lead. We picked that topic, and he's directed that we assess, analyze the entire Marine Corps overseas screening process, from medical to orders issuance and everything in between.
It's a mess.
Enlisted
right now.
and officer. And I tell you, we've discovered some really significant things. Like, we are the only service that screens after we issue orders.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of a problem.
Yeah.
There's no bite tied into getting out of orders overseas. I'm not talking medical, because that's going to happen. I'm okay with that.
Right.
But people can come alone. They don't have to come with their families.
True.
You're Marines. If you want to play the game, you got to be worldwide deployable. It's awesome that Secretary Mattis is in there right now, because he is going to be a direct tie into what we're doing. And I know Secretary Mattis personally, because I've served with him several times in combat. And I tell you, it has nothing to do against families that want to be stable. It has nothing to do with, having property and careers. I'm very sensitive to all that. But in the end, there's a select group of people that are carrying the weight of the overseas burden.
Yeah.
And I'm one of them, and I love it. But people think because my wife's Okinawan that I volunteered to come here. No, I've been overseas for 11 years straight.
Yeah.
I'll say that again. I've been overseas for 11 years straight. The last 3 assignments I did not volunteer for. I was selected and assigned to, and I executed my orders.
Yeah, we're going on leave for the first time as a family back home to Texas since our arrival here. So it's almost 2 years.
Yeah.
And I've got some in-laws and some relatives that are up in age, and for a lot of them, and we talk to the boys, in close hold about that aspect. Is like, look, this could potentially be goodbye.
Yeah.
With your great grandfather, with either of your great grandfathers, and so I need you to really focus on spending quality time with them, and put your iPad away and interact, and so now fast forward to 2018, and those relatives are still with us, and so we're going home to
Thank goodness.
Yeah, exactly, to spend some more quality time. For me personally, as a father, I was thinking, I could take the amount of money that it's going to cost for us to fly back to Texas, and get a Airbnb and all the meals and everything associated with international travel to go back home to Texas. We can take that money. We can go to China. We could go to
That's right.
Europe. We can go to Australia, New Zealand. You can pick any place in the world we can go, and we can have a memorable, once in a lifetime experience because of where we're pre-positioned out. In Marine Corps fashion. On Okinawa, and overwhelmingly the family was, no, we want to go back, we want to see our loved ones and reconnect, and I can't, as a father, I can't argue with that.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing, but it does take a toll, and I think a lot of people who aren't exposed to that dedication, to that commitment, to that sacrifice, are unaware of what really goes into it. Even simple things such as, being able to call at a time in which, if Elizabeth wants to talk with her mother, she's got to carve out a specific time frame. Yeah. And then from an operational standpoint, getting into a VTC with somebody who's hosting it from the East Coast, that means for us, we got to be in at 2-3 in the morning.
That's right. Consistently.
And for me, it's almost embarrassing that we've talked for years about pivoting to the Pacific, but yet we receive the minimal share of resources as we've done so. And I'm constantly having to fight for funding in order to go back CONUS for some of these working groups, conferences, TAD trips.
Yeah.
And when I go back, you're crossing time and space. You're time traveling, literally. Yeah, and I mean, I think you travel a lot more than I do. So you're jet lag. And you lose days.
You do lose days
just to go back for maybe 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And there's some trips where you just have to make the decision, like, it's just not worth it, unfortunately. And so it feels as though 3MEF kind of loses out on the ability to provide that input, to provide their observations or their perspective, and so we're constantly having to fight from a disadvantaged position as it pertains to the rest of the force. What do you think that we could do better, differently, or more effectively in order to counter that aspect of our place here?
Yeah, that's actually one of my initiatives. I don't have a name for it, but we need to do a better job about advertising what we do. A little bit of bragging involved, a little bit of showcasing our Marines, our individuals, our commands. Exactly what you said, getting back and making sure that we're relevant. Because when I talk to people, I hear comments like, "Oh, that's 3MEF. They're out there in the Pacific," and it's almost as if sometimes you can contribute to your own lack of relevance if you fall into the trap of not making an effort to being a part of like the things you're saying. So it takes sacrifice. It takes those VTCs, or we're not going to have the opportunity to make the difference we want. There's a lot of perceptions in stateside units that 3MEF is the 3MEF of 10 years ago, where we were on complete lockdown. We're not really on lockdown anymore. We have rules and regulations still, but it's nothing like 10 years ago when I had to be in Charlie's as a sergeant to go pay my cell phone bill out in town because of Liberty incidents.
Right.
I had to get permission, and it's nothing like that. And I think that hurts our reputation. That hurts the ability for us to recruit talented people that have different ideas that may want to come out here. The saying, when families come to 3MEF, there's claw marks all across the Pacific coming here.
I've never heard that before, but
and when it's time for them to go home, there's claw marks.
It's funny because it's true.
And when it's time to go home, one, they don't want to leave, and two, when it's time to go home, there's claw marks going all the way back across the Pacific because they're dragging.
Right.
No, don't take me. Yeah. So we could do a better job about how we interact on social media. People will always give opinions. That's just the nature of the beast. But if you really want to be a part of the contribution to how valuable 3MEF is, we got to do a better job of what we're saying online, what we're saying on the radio, how we interact with people not in 3MEF. We can be our own worst enemies, whether it's spouses or active duty folks. We tend to hurt ourselves a little bit on that, and sometimes it's based off an emotional one-time situation. I think that's where we could really help ourselves, is on the personal side of selling the greatness of 3MEF. And that's why I'm doing all the different things I'm doing, the shows, the education, highlighting spouses. I'm really going after highlighting spouse efforts, because spouses are, there's only 800 jobs in MCCS. There's several thousand wives. There's depression, there's other issues, there's divorce rates. And a lot of that is spouses just get tired of sitting here and feel like they don't have an impact and significance. So all those things hurt our recruitability and people wanting to come here.
Yeah. And it kind of, the other thing is, we've got Army here, we've got Navy here, we've got Air Force here, but they're not all equivalent in the way in which the onboarding process is to Okinawa. Even such down to the point of those young airmen are afforded the opportunity to get vehicles right off the bat.
They are.
And our guys aren't afforded that opportunity. Even something as simple as household goods shipment is a key difference between us and the other services. And then from an employment standpoint, Liz teaching in the DODEA system, she as a local hire, is treated differently than those teachers that are hired from overseas. And, they get to bring in 100% household goods shipment.
That's right.
She does not rate
The housing
housing allowance,
LQA.
right? And if they're dual teachers, they double tap, they double dip, and they're I mean, the amount of money, it's almost grossly applied across those two differences, and they won't even interview or entertain hiring a spouse coming into Okinawa until she arrives, because they don't want to give them that overseas consideration.
Save the money.
Yeah, and that's it's sad, but it's just some of those key elements that contribute to the perception that life over here is rough. But I'll say that one of the best practices that I've identified, and I've tried to apply it when and where appropriate, is to send my monitor just a message from Sammy Castro mid-tour to let them know how things are going.
Yeah.
And just to give him my perspective on this billet, because at some point in time he's going to be identifying a replacement for me to come out. And I did it with Master Sergeant Joe Black, and just kind of let him know that, hey, I came out to Goodfellow Air Force Base. I wasn't happy about coming to the schoolhouse. I thought it was me getting put on the bench, but I'm so glad that I came. I've learned so much over the period of time that I was here. I ended up being stationed there for 4 years at that Air Force base. And it was one of the most rewarding tours. I think, 20 years from now, I'll look back on and enjoy my time there teaching on podium. And then here, most recently, I sent our current monitor, our outgoing monitor, Master Guns Pasqua, a message just telling him, hey, look, the Castro family is good on Oki, and we're content to stay here as long as we can.
Yeah.
It's tough. There's some challenges. The occasional lockdown when there's an incident. Nothing's perfect anywhere.
Yeah.
But there are things that we've been able to accomplish. We've been able to modify to our family's rhythm, pattern of life. That this is home for us now. And when he got that message, the monitor was like, wow, I never expected to get a message like that from a 2691 stationed in Okinawa. And I said the same thing to the incoming monitor. It's like, hey, I'm happy here.
Yeah.
Okinawa's home for us. It's an island. I was born on an island. So and we spent some time on the island of Hispaniola on the Dominican Republic as a family.
Awesome.
So, I mean, this is we've made this into a home, but part of that is identifying key avenues or channels for productive interaction with the locals, and you kind of touched on this, and that's what makes us, I think, good stewards of the organization out here at 3MEF, is that we interact with the local community, and we put down roots wherever we go.
Yes.
And so for me, I train out in town jiu-jitsu with British expats, Brazilian expats, the local Japanese, and then all the Marines from Hanson to Kinzer, and everywhere in between that show up. And there's other services too, soldiers and airmen will get down on the ground with us as well. And, at any point in time on a Saturday, you can hear English, Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese being spoken, and the techniques being explained in all those different languages. And that's for me, not only does that demonstrate, the global community that is within that jiu-jitsu world, but also the camaraderie that comes in sweating and practicing, taking each other's necks and arms off. But if I have a question about what grocery store to go to, I can ask Fumio or Maki or Seki, in any of these other training partners, Japanese training partners that I have, and they're going to give me the ground truth.
That's right.
And then by extension, Liz became a part of the Okinawa International Women's Club. She loves it.
I know.
They break down into their cultural groups, and they get out and they
I think they celebrated her birthday a couple weeks. Was it a couple weeks ago? Was it her birthday?
I think it was somebody else's birthday.
Was it? Okay.
Liz's birthday was at the end of March.
Okay,
but I
maybe
think
not.
Yeah,
But they
but-
had the OIWC
yeah.
had a Mexican party for one of the spouses. Or maybe it was a Cinco de
They,
Mayo.
sing-
event.
they
That's
did
what
it up
was.
at Belinda Timberlake's
Yeah,
house.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
That's what it was.
Those two have hit it off very, very well.
Yeah, Linda's awesome. She's
yeah.
a good friend of mine.
Good people. Good
Yeah.
people. I'm going to miss them when they're gone. As a matter of fact, I think we have plans to link up with them when we take leave in San Antonio.
Yeah.
We're going to be doing a college tour for my oldest, Enrique. He's 16, going to his junior year, and he's identified UT, I think UTSA, St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Trinity, St. Edward's in Austin, Houston, University of Houston, which is where my little sister's going for her freshman year, and then Rice University. So we'll hit those
Nice.
those up just to kind of check them out. He can get a perspective and start doing that college tour thing, because it's right around the corner. Like
Yeah.
I told him that time flies. Before you know it, you'll be in your cap and gown and
Yeah.
ready for bigger and better
Taking on
things.
life. I was a guest of honor for the San Antonio Marine Corps Ball last year.
Oh yeah, it was who told me that. I can't remember who it was I had the conversation with, but it was Bobby Jackson,
Okay.
a good buddy of mine. He got out of the Marine Corps, I think as a staff sergeant, then crossed over to be part of the reserves, but he works out there in San Antonio at one of the sites out there, and he was telling me he was excited to see you come in.
Yeah.
When I was there in San Antonio, we had I think to a detriment, we left it up to the junior Marines to how we were going to handle the ball. I think that we should take into consideration their wishes, but also be mindful that sometimes the command climate or their individual proclivities will dictate their responses when asked for input. And not that the older, saltier Marines know better, but there's value in getting together outside of your community, and they had the mindset that they wanted to keep it close hold just within our company of about 70 Marines, and there's some value in having a closer, more intimate event, but there's more than just our company in San Antonio. There's a greater community. You got the recon guys and you got the security forces guys, and why not bring them all together? And because then at that point in time, when you do that, you broaden the scope, you tie into what makes us unique as an organization, the fact that we're Marines, we're brothers, we're sisters in arms, and you also bring in those retirees that are there, and I think you probably had some conversations about the importance of tying into those guys. But what was it like when they brought you in?
Oh man, it was amazing. First, I'd never been to San Antonio. There's this thought in my mind that I've always. So I'm from California, but I've always felt that I was going to retire in San Antonio.
Why?
Because everybody that I talked to from Texas, the ones that I respected the most.
I just reloaded on my coffee, by the way.
Yeah, my mug's too far away. If not, I'd get one. But
you can go get it. I can cut it out. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, let me finish this story.
Okay.
But, went to San Antonio. Landed. I don't know if you know retired Sergeant Major Laura Brown.
I do not.
Angela Manis, retired Sergeant Major, is there. Also Irene O'Neill, former IGMC. All of them are retired there. But they brought me in with open arms up to New Braunfels. Stayed up there for a couple of days, and then, I was really struggling with what I wanted to talk about because I had heard about the patriotism, the military, just intensity,
right,
and love of the community.
Yeah.
So I was really intimidated. I was like, man, this speech has got to be perfect. But everything you've been talking about today, it's interestingly enough, is what I talked about. I talked about the Marine Corps and what we're known for, our warfighting prowess, the discipline, and I gave them an update that we're still exactly all of that.
Yeah.
I talked about innovation. I talked about how corporals are designing drones and doing counter drone technology, and how infantry squads now have drones at the squad level and they can spot the enemy, call for fire, whatever. I talked about how we can print F-35 parts like we just did on the Mu, all those type of things. And then I gave them homework. I asked them to never settle for not being invited to some of the things that we do. Keep themselves a part of the active duty community. That's right.
Okay.
I told them to embrace our newest Marines that get out of the military, or all service members. I said, help them integrate into the community, help them find themselves in jobs and what their place is. So if you've already been through all that. And I just told them to continue to be a part of our lives. I said, don't think we don't want to sit with you at the VFW.
Yeah.
We do.
So I just joined the VFW and the American Legion here.
I did it last year. And I tell you, I'll give you a copy of my speech, but I thought it was pretty good. Very motivating, very well received. Standing ovation. I never get standing ovations. And but specifically,
your words can overcome your looks.
Absolutely. I got a face for radio. That's why I'm on this, not on TV. So, man, I tell you. But I connected very well with that city. I felt really good leaving. I do want to go back this year to visit, and depending on what the career is looking like, I'm gonna start looking for property. And my wife is not completely sold yet.
Yeah.
But
so we lived on the northeast side in the Santerra region, right there around the golf course. We had a private gated community. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
It was about a 35 to 45 minute commute to the site on Petrenko. Mm-hmm. But interestingly, we were looking at, kind of like that, when you're designing a kitchen, the sink, the countertop, stove, that key area, that triangle, right? We were kind of looking at where's the church, where's the jiu-jitsu, and where are the schools, right? Those are the key areas. And then from the schools, taking some of my training as an intelligence analyst, you kind of do a shape pull, like, all right, where are the best elementary schools? Because we had, one kid going into elementary school, but he wasn't going to be there the entire time, and he was going to transition over to middle school, at least so we thought, until I got selected for Mass Sergeant. They said, you got to leave. And then, looked at the high school and that area, and we had some friends there that we've been close to for quite a few years. Liz is a little bit older than me. They went to high school with Liz, so I met them through her, but they've been in the area for quite a while, Jeff and Allison Balfour, and they had just started their own restaurant down, a brewery/restaurant down in the Pearl District. So we kind of went off of some of their advice and guidance. I found that place, and it was perfect for us. Nice little restaurants, coffee shops, gyms. I mean, anything that you would need. There's a nice HEB right close by, and if you go back to San Antonio, you need to hit up those HEBs because they're amazing. And we're just right down the street from the university, UTSA, as well as the La Cantera shopping center. So if you haven't hit that up, I definitely recommend that too. But like I said, we're headed back home to Texas for a while, and 32 days. Yeah.
Excited, huh?
Yeah, I never keep leave. Sorry, Major. I never keep leave. I always use it. It's been, for me, that's part of our compensation for what we do, and it's also part of maintaining that balance.
It is.
And I've got two strong-willed young males growing up under my roof, and we need to get out and play.
Yeah.
We need to get out and experience things, and if that's a trip to Tokyo for a jiu-jitsu tournament, or if it's traveling back, going sailing. I think when we come back, not only are because I got the Boys and Scouts here on Courtney.
Oh yeah.
I'm running the Venture Crew and the Boy Scout troop here on this base. There's some challenges and difficulties associated with it, but it's definitely a productive avenue for my boys to get some good skills that I think will stand them well through their lifespan, right? Because I've explained to them time and again, I'm not going to be here forever. Mm-hmm. And my job is to prepare you to go on without me. And they understand it. Like, so, making a fire, tying knots, sharpening a knife, learning how to how to sew, those things that are just fundamental skills that, we as Marine leaders wish that all of our Marines had under their belt. And I think it makes for a well-rounded, human being, because left to their own devices, and I do mean devices, that's exactly where they'll remain. But it's okay to put them away for a little bit and interact on a face-to-face basis.
It's funny you say that, because one of the biggest skill sets I have that's benefited my marriage is sewing and ironing.
Sewing and ironing.
I can sew and iron way better than my wife can.
I can say I iron and sew better than my wife.
And I'll tell you, there's nothing unmanly about that.
No, not at all.
Every person, especially female friends and friends of the family and other people's, because I'm a Marine, they automatically attribute it to that. But I'll tell you, something as simple as, it's about presentation. It's about taking care of yourself. Just all those skill sets you're teaching your boys. Absolutely, man. And I didn't learn that till later in life. Well, ironing I always took up on my own growing up, but sewing was, in the Marine Corps.
It was my grandmother that taught me how to iron. So my parents divorced when I was a freshman, going into my sophomore year, and my father ended up getting custody of my brother and I. So for a few years, at least, we were raised by him underneath my grandparents' roof, and so I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. And she raised 5 kids, the first 4 of which were boys. So little bit of a rough exterior on Lincha. And she came up in a rough time frame, and the 50s and the 60s and 70s, and down there in Texas, and just still a tough woman, a woman with grit.
Yeah.
And exactly what you expect a grandmother to be. And there were certain things that she just wasn't going to tolerate. You're going to learn how to do this, and you're going to learn how to do that, and just like your dad and your uncles learned how to do. And she was the one that when we were roughhousing in the living room at their house, me and my cousins, who were all in about the same age, and the first 5 grandsons were all boys. They tell us, first one that cries gets a whipping. That's not a common perspective any longer.
That's right.
But let me ask you. So you came over when you were 4.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get your citizenship?
So it took a really long time. Initially, when we came over, and this is just what I remember from my parents telling me, but we came over under a program. I think it was called Carta Silva, which was an immigration visa type program. I couldn't tell you if it was a work program, if it was a live and work program, but we lived on that program all the way until probably 1985, 86, when I was in high school. And then there was some big immigration push around that time. So we got our legal green cards at the time, mid-80s, and then I joined the Marine Corps. So when I joined the Marine Corps, I was a green card holder. I wasn't a citizen, and so I was limited to what I could do. I didn't think about that, but I was.
Right.
And then I stayed as a green card holder for my first 8 years, because I was always traveling. I was overseas. I was deployed a lot. Not until right before I went to the drill field, and I was a staff sergeant select, did they say, you got to get your green card, or you can't serve.
What?
Yeah, because I had to be a staff CO in my MOS. I had to be a citizen.
Okay.
So that kind of forced me to get my citizenship. Not that I didn't want to be a citizen. I was too busy being a Marine. I was a sergeant. I was probably at my peak when it comes to feeling good about the MOS, making an impact. I was leading 40 to 60 man platoons,
right?
Operations, deploying all over the place. At the time, I was at Pendleton, so just came back from a deployment down to Central America, Guatemala, almost dying from dengue fever. Crazy stuff. I got so many stories. And so I finally said, okay, if I want to stay in the game, I gotta meet the standards. So I put in for my citizenship. It took me about a year. And I finally got my citizenship right before I went to the drill field. So I got a picture of me in dress blues down in San Diego. sworn in, and then a couple weeks later heading down to DI school in San Diego. But that's how I became a citizen. Um, my wife was already with me at the time, so because I wasn't a citizen when we got married in 1995, so 2 years before that, I had to bring her over on what was called a humanitarian parole visa.
Okay.
So she could only be in America with me. She couldn't work. She couldn't do anything else because she was married to me as a service member under this humanitarian status. So finally, I was able to get my citizenship about 2 years later, and then we started her process up. And we ended up moving a bunch of times, and her process was delayed to the point that 2002, I was going on a MU, which eventually ended up going to OIF1. I didn't know that, but I got a letter that she was going to get deported because we missed an appointment, which was caused by a PCS, which I submitted an address change for. Very stressful time. I was a gunny. I was trying to get my deployment stuff ready, and then this drops on me. So first time in my entire life that I ever wrote to a congressman and asked for help. And Linda Sanchez out of California, I think she's still serving, engaged, got me an appointment the next day after she received the letter. And my wife got her green card, and then we've been blessed ever since to not have any more problems.
Wow.
So, but man, it was stressful. It was tough. Is not being a citizen is a significant, can hamper your career in so many ways.
You said Linda Sanchez?
Yeah, Linda Sanchez. She's out of California. I think she's still a congressman or congresswoman, excuse me.
Yeah, she's serving in Congress since 2003.
Yeah. So it was right around that time that I remember her helping me, and it was a significant personal, achievement for my wife and I that she helped. But man, it was stressful. So being an immigrant and growing up in the U.S. military and going through all that experience has made me even better. I'm always sensitive to if there's a immigration ceremony going here, people don't pay attention to that.
Yeah,
that's like the top of my radar. I'm excited. I'm going over there.
You consider yourself a dreamer?
I'm a precursor to what dreamers are.
Yeah.
I think I absolutely appreciate what America has done for my family, for me, for my wife, for my parents. I don't know if I'm a dreamer because I've lived and worked really hard to get where I'm at today. But I do feel like in that aspect that we can't punish kids for something their parents may have done as long as they're clean, legit,
right,
making an effort, good students, good citizens, good people. Give them the opportunities is my personal thoughts on that. We talk about felons and all that other stuff. People that have not done a good part, a good part of society. Well, I got a problem with that because I earned my citizenship. I wasn't born into it,
right? And
I've been a pretty good damn citizen.
Does that make it that much sweeter for you? You think
it does? I friggin' absolutely earned every bit of it, and and having been served in combat, 4 different tours, earned my way up not only in the country but in the Marine Corps. I mean, it's extra special for me, and it all goes back to why I really appreciate being a Marine.
How important is diversity for us as an organization?
I think it's very important. So I remember back to the early 90s, I was one of the first Marines in the company to have an email account. I was...
What?
Yeah, because they put me into the training section.
Okay.
So I was good NCO. I was
pretty
good.
I remember a time when not every Marine had a
That's right.
We called it NMCI at that point.
That's
an
right.
NMCI account.
Yeah.
Only a few of us.
It was a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, we still had typewriters, so you became really good at not making mistakes. Right? Because you didn't want to type.
I used a lot of whiteout.
I used a lot of whiteout. So, but yeah, just so. Anyways, my point would be, I remember logging in and typing in Marquez to check my name or Martinez or whatever, and there wasn't many. Matter of fact, I was the only one. I think there was another Mass Sergeant once for like a year long, and then he retired. But there wasn't a lot of Hispanics, at least not by name. You couldn't find them, you couldn't see them, and being Hispanic, being Mexican, I would look for that just to see who's out there and what's the highest ranking, Mexicano or whatever.
Yeah. Because
that was important to me. At least I thought it was, to see are there people like me that are achieving and being successful. but you didn't see it for forever, for a long time. And now I type in my last name, there's hundreds of names.
Right.
And that kind of makes me proud. It shows that more and more youth of ethnicity, of a different background are joining the military. And not just Hispanics. I'm talking, blacks, Europeans, Middle Easterners, Asians. I think it's important because I do believe that diversity does represent a snapshot of America. But I still believe that our promotion system must be based on performance and talent, not just on maybe a quota for a race or something like that. I think we all have to be able to be held to the same standard. And I think there's more than enough talent in the Marine Corps right now that the right people are being promoted. We just got to get more minorities to stay in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
That's the problem is why are people like me and you and others not wanting to stay in the Marine Corps? What is it that they don't feel this is a long-term commitment for them? Some of it is our family. I'm the only guy in my entire generation that has stayed in the military. I've only had like one or two others that even joined. And I've been very successful. I mean, multiple accolades, DI of the year, logistician of the year for the whole Marine Corps, drill instructor, other visible accomplishments.
Right.
And my whole family highly respects me. But why is it that none of them are joining the military? That bothers me. Why is, if my impact is so significant?
I remember a line from the movie Boys in the Hood. I was maybe a sophomore in high school when that movie came out, if I recall correctly. And Lawrence Fishburne's character, Furious Styles,
Yep.
says,
Yep.
There's no place in the Army for a young black man. And I conflated at that point in my life, anything that applied to African Americans is also applying to Hispanics.
Yeah.
And I accepted that to a certain extent, but then I started to understand that a significant portion of my grandfather's generation had served in the military, in the Army, the Navy. Some relatives I didn't know served in the military until after I joined the Marine Corps. But I think the only one that stayed in to retire out of the military was my grandfather's brother, Robert, who retired from the Air Force, and then got a job in the U.S. Postal Service and retired from there as well. But he moved out to Washington and wasn't around locally. I saw him every so often at like family reunions or when he would come down to visit. But for the most part, he was just this external entity with very little direct contact with young Sammy. But I think that a lot of it is a perception that it is not what we do.
Yeah.
But there are, now that I'm aware, there are a high number of cases in point, examples, one of which is one of 3MEF's own, Rafael Peralta, right?
That's right.
Young Marine that was killed in combat. And I think he was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross.
Yep.
There was a lot of talk, controversy about him getting the Medal of Honor. And they ended up naming the 31st Muse building is after him.
Yep.
And I had a conversation with one of our young sergeants that's up with me in the MEF G2, if he knew who that Marine was. And sadly,
he doesn't know.
He didn't know. So I made him research it and get back to me and then explain to me, Sergeant, the meaning behind the insignia for the USS Peralta.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. They got a ship named. He's got a ship named after him.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yep. So
one of our war fighters.
Yeah. And I understand that there was some controversy over the actual circumstances behind his death, but when he pulled up the insignia, which says Fortis ad Finum, the DDG 115, but it's got the sergeant chevrons on it, along with the Aztec eagle.
Awesome.
and then 2 lions, one with the Navy Cross, the other with the Purple Heart.
I tell you, man, that is significant.
Yeah.
I mean, especially to add the Aztec eagle like that.
Because he was not an American citizen.
Correct. Right. And then they got the Marine helmet, the Kevlar. I tell you, that just shows how far we've come with progression on embracing what the image of America is, especially in the military. I mean, because the military is supposed to be the go-to example of the right end state or the right functioning of American society when you talk about integrating different cultures. I mean, man, that's another thing I love about being a Marine is just I've learned so much from being a Marine about life and other people than I would have by staying home in LA.
Yeah.
If I would have stayed home in LA, I would have been exposed to more racism and other biased opinions and thoughts and even media and what we watch. And that bothers me. That bothers me that some people back home are completely sold on everything and anything that they hear. And so another thing about being a Marine, man, is just it keeps you honest. You've seen the world.
Yeah.
You know that in your own heart, you can make an honest assessment about
an individual's character.
Right.
And
you're not judging them on the exterior.
Right.
You see the whole picture.
Yeah. And, so to kind of to touch on that a little bit, when I came in, we used to say the term dark green Marine,
Yeah, that's right.
or light green Marine.
Yeah.
But now that has a negative connotation to it.
It does.
And one of the Marines in the USMC subreddit had asked about, why we said that, and I had to kind of explain it from a historical perspective. Like before, I mean, there was a significant amount of racism.
Yeah.
Where you heard, the N-bomb and other racial epithets, and in an effort to counter that, they tried to paint it that we're all green. Right. We have some Marines that are light green, some Marines that are medium green, some Marines that are dark green.
Right.
But we're all green. But then, from a perspective that had a benevolent aspect to it, it was kind of twisted and seen as pejorative.
Yeah.
And I don't think I don't think I have the full scope of whether that's right or wrong. It was just an effort to kind of change things at that point in time that now in retrospect could be deemed insensitive or inappropriate. Well,
there's other examples, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
Something as simple as a flip chart.
Okay, right.
A flip chart is it's an easel board made out of paper, and you have to flip the pages over.
Right.
Right. It's a flip chart. We used to give classes on it. It was the way we did business. We didn't have computers, so we wrote it out. We gave periods of instructions. Right. Well, flipper or other words can be taken as disrespectful towards Filipinos or certain people, and so at some point it was deemed that flip chart was insensitive. So now it's a turn chart, and really it was about the action of flipping the piece of paper over, not anything else. But
right.
Again, deemed insensitive. Indian runs. I mean,
yeah.
Indian run is when you run from the back to the front, you sprint and everybody's running in.
We can't say Indian runs no more.
We can't say Indian runs anymore. At least that's what you hear. That's what I hear. It's insensitive. It's last man up run, or we just some of the things we do may not be common sense, but if somebody's offended by it.
I tell you what I'm offended by when somebody says taco rice.
Yeah. Right. That's right. So here's a funny joke. One of my friends used to call me and my wife taco rice.
Oh.
Very close friend.
Okay, so he could get away with it.
Oh yeah, I'm Mexican. She's Japanese. She's
right.
Okinawan. So people are going to laugh at that. I think it's kind of funny, but boy, that can be very insensitive.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're right.
And the wrong aspect, the wrong audience or approach, it could be insensitive.
And taco rice is a dish. It's taco meat that there's no tortilla. It's just, you know what it is. I mean, it's rice. It's delicious. My wife makes some of the best taco rice on earth.
But it's just white rice when she could put sazon on it. And
she can. That's right.
You know, like so when Liz makes her rice, and she makes some of the best rice, such that I don't even attempt to make the rice in the house. I'll make the beans. I'll make the carne guisada, or I'll make the fajitas, or I'll make the main dish and the beans, but I don't touch the rice because it's an art form.
Yes, it is.
But I couldn't contemplate just serving what I just prepared from the main Tex-Mex dish to the frijoles a la charra.
Yeah.
You know, with the bacon and the cilantro and the onions and the tomatoes and all of that, with just plain white rice.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't go.
It doesn't go.
And so, I mean, for me, and this is just me, this is just Sammy talking, it's lazy.
Yeah, you can spice it up in many different ways. But,
Yeah.
you know, one of my favorites, since we're talking about beans, one of my favorite dishes I've ever had, and I've not made it too much, but we've had it a couple of times, is 16 bean soup.
Okay.
I think it's a Texas dish.
Yeah.
My friend Jesse Cuellar, who was a DI, senior drill instructor at the time when I was a green belt, he took us over to his house one day. His wife made, they're from Tejas, and they made a giant pot of 16 bean soup. Best beans I've ever had in my life. And I eat beans all the time. I'm calling what you call a frijolero. I eat beans all the
But
time.
in Cali, you eat the black beans.
No, we had brown. We had the brown pinto beans.
The pinto beans. Most of the time that I go to California, a lot of the restaurants just serve the black beans. I can't get down with I can't get down with the black beans.
No, I can't either. I mean, I'll have them if I'm eating them,
Yeah.
you know, just fresh with like a healthy meal. My wife would quinoa or whatever it's called, mix them up, different kinds of beans, and then that's my post PT workout, chow or something. But
Yeah. There's something about that beans and rice. And then some type of meat to go on top of it. Yeah. Yeah. So we had a hard time coming to grips with the fact that since we were no longer in Texas, which is where we were before coming out to Oki, there's not a lot of places where you could find good tortillas. So we had to step our game up as a family. I bought Liz one of those KitchenAid mixers.
Mm-hmm.
So she'll prep the dough, let it set, and we'll, you know, and the boys, we got our little assembly line. We roll it out and heat it up, and we'll make tortillas occasionally as a family, the four of us. And so, you know, we've kind of had to change some things, but you know, that time in the kitchen together is time well spent. And I've over the years I've increased my repertoire of dishes that I'll make.
Yeah.
Because initially Liz did most of the cooking in the family, but I've taken over that to a certain extent. It's like she makes spaghetti, but my spaghetti's a lot better.
Yeah.
But carne guisada is definitely one of my main dishes. But just recently we got together with Orlando and his wife and some other friends down in Okuma, and Liz had seasoned up the flank steak fajitas for like almost 3 days. And so when
it must have been really soft and
so when we finally threw it on the grill, it was amazing.
I'm getting hungry.
Yeah, exactly. It's getting close to chow time, but you know it just goes to show that there's value in having those different cultures, because with those different cultures comes the different you know, dishes, the religions, the perspectives. You know, that diversity is part of what makes us unique. It also provides a level of resiliency and different perspectives in order to view the operational environment. And you know, I remember certain times on deployment where we were heated conversation about politics or religion, you know, me and my team members, and you know, just learning to appreciate the other Marines' perspective. And there was never anything said that drove a wedge between us that would decrease cohesion. If anything, if taken at face value and every individual was allowed the opportunity to express themselves and articulate their position, it strengthened our bonds with one another, and part of what makes us as a brotherhood a unique organization. But you know, one of the things that I wanted to touch back on was, you know, how did you approach the application of the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell when you were in a leadership position at that point in time? Because you were a sergeant major at that point,
Yes,
still,
I
right?
was. I
So,
was.
so what was that like? Because I know for a fact that, you know, when I came in '99, homosexuality was one of those things that was deemed to be less than human, or
Yes.
less than a man,
Right.
at a minimum. And so that was a huge shift for us as a warfighting organization. And, you know, for me, I was assigned to the Defense Attaché office in Santo Domingo, and we had for the first time an openly gay ambassador assigned to a Latin American country whose state-sponsored religion was Roman Catholicism. And the cardinal that was there, and I think he was a primate, if I'm not mistaken, were highly critical of that choice of President Obama's, and, you know, stated as such that, you know, we would never, as the United States, we would never do that to one of the Middle Eastern nations. Why would we do that to one of our trade partners in the Caribbean or Latin America? And although I hear that and I understand it, you know, me being Catholic myself, but there are certain things where my beliefs and the beliefs of my organized, structured religion don't interfere with my professional abilities to execute my responsibilities. And so, you know, for me, and I had a lot of conversation one-on-one with Ambassador Brewster. The way that I saw it was, they're all my Marines.
Yeah.
And so some of these Marines have had to hide themselves over these years, and you know, what would I do if one of those Marines came to me with an issue that they were either being, you know, subjected to cruel maltreatment or you know, assault, or, you know, I mean, a whole list of what ifs could, you know, come out of that environment when you've got a command climate that diminishes or dehumanizes those Marines, and that was my perspective on it. But what did Mario?
Well, same thing. Roman Catholic, very very religious growing up. Went to church every single week. You know, I did every part of the religion that says you have to do at this age: confirmation, baptism, all that. Got married by Justice of the Peace, but when I got back to the States, we had a Catholic wedding. I mean, everything. We've always followed that. And part of that is it's parental example, societal expectation and obligation to both your religion, your family, commitment to honoring, you know, them and all that we've learned in our upbringing. But initially it was hard for me because although I suspected some of my Marines at times were homosexual, and I never ever mentioned it. I never made decisions that I knew went against them for that reason. If I ever made any decision on any of my Marines ever in my career, it was based on their performance or lack thereof, right? So I could honestly say that when it came into the law, I was not for it, but I knew that I had to make a decision. I can stay in the Marine Corps and follow orders and regulations because I'm a good Marine and that's what I do, and not let that personal conflict or belief impact me, or I can retire, like we were told we can do as an option.
Right.
And I wasn't ready to retire. That was not so significant of an issue that it was worth me leaving the Marine Corps for. And oh, by the way, I had been exposed to so many cultures. So back to the culture thing.
Yeah.
So much culture and so much difference, and people being different and why. Everything from what they eat to how they dress to what music they listen to, that it completely it just took the sting out of anything that I thought I was going to have with that issue. So I was prepared by the Marine Corps, by the goodness of everything that I had learned to that point. I just didn't know that. In my mind, along with probably many other thousands of people or whatever it was, you know, it was going to be a little worse than we thought. But what really pushed me across the line to be okay with it was when the commandant said, every rule and regulation remains in place. Every EO, sexual assault, all these things, process procedures are still going to apply to everybody in the Marine Corps like they do right now. So nobody's going to be able to do anything different, immorally, unethically. We're still going to be a Marine Corps. And that really helped me push past it, because you're absolutely right. To your point, that just shows that everybody gets treated fairly. Everything applies to everybody equally, regardless of what your activities may be or what your beliefs are. And all that helped me push past that. And to all the guys that said, I'm getting out, I'm retiring, which there was a bunch, most of those guys didn't get out because, for whatever reason. And I get it. You know, people still have their beliefs. They still have their convictions.
Right.
And as long as it doesn't impact work, that's what professionals do. The transgender thing was similar, right? It's a completely different issue, I think. And, you know, we're still dealing with that right now, and what's going to happen. I did think it was it looks bad that we said, yeah, you can serve, and then now we're saying no. And it's a big old legal, moral dilemma. What I do believe we have to be careful on is truly and genuinely how that impacts combat readiness, operational readiness, the health of the individuals, because it's pretty serious when you start doing the whole process from what I know it would be meant to be to do a full transition.
Yeah. I'm not educated or informed very much on the process or the mechanics associated with that. I just know that it's not easy. It's difficult and challenging. And I mean, there's a whole bevy of implications that come out of that that I'm just not read in on.
Yeah.
But as a leader, I probably need to become more conscious, because if, you know, what happens when one of my junior Marines comes to me and says, "Hey, Master Sergeant, this is what I'm going through or working against, and I need your help," and that's kind of been my approach. I think I mentioned it a while back. I learned from my mother's mentor in social work. She's she's almost like a great aunt to us. And as a matter of fact, for Mother's Day, when I was back home in Texas, I was able to we sat down at her dinner table with my mom, my stepmom, and had dinner. And one of the things she taught me was the importance of having a mantra or some key word that we could go back to for moments of reflection. And you could see it as a prayer or as meditation. For me, it's kind of both, because my word comes, it's the Latin word servium, which is what Archangel Michael said to Lucifer. He said, I will serve. So for me, I've taken that as my personal challenge is, you know, serving others. And that's kind of what we are as sergeants, right?
Yeah.
To go back to the joint environment where we're all sergeants.
Yeah.
That we're servants, and I have an obligation to serve all my Marines. And the last thing I want to be is unprepared for that type of challenge should it present itself. But you know, I think one of the unforeseen implications of that aspect of the LGBTQ community being fully embraced and accepted into the Marine Corps is that it may push us in unforeseen ways towards a single standard. And that's something that has been a controversial topic for quite a few years, is that there's a PFT standard for males and there's a PFT standard for females. But it looks as though in the way that we've kind of rescaled our PFT, CFT, now female Marines are afforded the opportunity to do pull-ups and are encouraged to do so. And the push-ups are now a viable approach as well. But you can't max out 100 points on the push-ups, right? But do you see it going that way, that we're going to have a single standard across the board? And what are some of the benefits or disadvantages from your perspective towards that?
Yeah, so there's always been a perception, at least from me growing up, you too probably, that sometimes female Marines got a little bit easier, even though that's not necessarily the case.
I don't think I could do the max flexed arm hang.
Yeah,
unless I trained for it.
I did that once. It was really hard. But so there's always that that discussion that it's easier for a female to get a 300, which I don't know. I mean, they still have to exercise this, they have to train. The bodies are different, and there's always been that argument. So there's too much conflicting information and belief with that. But I know what the commandants try to do is out of all these discussions and conflict with this exact issue, the Marine Corps realized that we didn't even have standards for most MOSs in the first place.
Yeah.
To be a grunt, you just had to graduate SOI and not have a 300 PFT and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So part of the working groups that we did with female integration was to go back and study and test each MOS, determine what physical requirements they had to have just to serve in the MOS. This all feeds into the eventual PFT, CFT discussion too.
Right.
So now we've gone back and we've actually set standards and norms for MOS schools for some of the more physically challenging combat MOSs. Out of that, we're continuing to refine and test and gather data on how are we performing. I mean, we just went to 23 pull-ups for a young guy to get. That's a lot. That's
it is a lot.
More pull-ups.
Yeah. I think I did 21 on one PFT when I was like 28, just to kind of drive a point home and prove to the Marines, hey, I could do 21.
Yeah.
But now I'm lucky if I can get my 20.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know that we'll go to one standard. I think, and I hope we will always be common sense enough to be able to have a little deviation. I mean, one of the greatest things I think we've done recently is allow a injured Marine to now row.
Okay.
That is just smart. As much as old school as I was one of those guys, we got to keep the standards. You know what? Okay, that's smart. You know why? Because I'm hurt. And now I'm in a position, I've always been fit, but now that my knees hurt and I'm having to really stress out and try to figure out how I'm going to stay in shape and keep up with these young guys.
Yeah.
Maybe it took a personal injury for me to realize that, okay, there's better ways of doing business. I don't think we'll ever go to one standard. I think we'll have some variety, shape, or form. Do I think that female Marines will continue to progress and get strong and become more competitive in male standards? Absolutely. But I also think that male Marines will become more conditioned to harder standards because we have a higher standard. That's what being a Marine's about, is making really tough stuff normal for you, and then peaking from that as you go higher and more senior. You just do more and more difficult things.
That's one of the reasons why I stopped running as much as I used to, is just because of the fact that it does take a toll on your body. I'd rather put on, thick, funky pajamas and get on the ground and grapple for an hour and a half, 2 hours straight, as opposed to go on a 3 mile, 5 mile run. It's just more fun to me.
Yeah.
There's just, I don't know, for me, I see it as it's more difficult. You got a guy trying to put you to sleep.
Oh yeah. You lose a lot of calories in that too. Man.
Yeah, and this Okinawa heat, wearing that thick cloth and going at it, you sweat you sweat it out. That's for sure. But the other thing I wanted to ask you was, give me a second to pull it up.
Sure.
So you said you spent some time with Mattis, with Neller. What are some of the key perspectives or insights that you gleaned from being next to some of those senior leaders in your time with them?
Mattis is about being well-read, knowledgeable, educated in a very broad perspective, not only including military, but outside of military knowledge and information. I mean, the guy's a scholar.
Yeah.
He was single his whole career. There's a reason he reads so much. And that's why he's being successful where he's at. He is the balance of the United States of America right now. He really is. And so I learned that from him, and that's why I like to read different books, different topics. I don't get into the romance and all that type of stuff as much, but I'll read about politics. I'll read about money. I'll read about crime. I'll read about the Middle East. I read about Israel. I just read a book on, it's called The Cleanest Race. It's about North Korea. Pretty good book. It's kind of short, but it's just a different perspective on the mindset and thought process of how North Korea thinks and why. Right now, I'm reading one of the biographies on Ronald Reagan. A big fan of Ronald Reagan, not necessarily policy-wise, but how he was a role model, a gentlemanly character, and how he stood his ground and really kind of helped end the Cold War. I think those are all traits of a leader that we need in our leaders today, because society today is so volatile, it's so insensitive, it's so we're quick to talk about sex and all this crazy stuff publicly,
Right.
and that it eats away at the moral fiber of America. And the Marine Corps is one of the few places that we're trying to keep the moral fiber still as something that's important. But I kind of lost track of where I was going with that. But
Essentially, like some of the things that you gleaned from your time with
Yes.
Neller and Mattis.
General Neller, innovative, being a rebel. It's okay to be rebellious. It's okay to say something and go against the grain. Demanding. One time, so I was actually working with some of your guys. I was brand new in the Middle East. That was my first assignment at the general officer level. And I walk into a room, and my boss there was a commanding general. We were working in Bahrain, and I had just left Yemen. So I was in Yemen at the embassy and another site. And remember, I wasn't a grunt. I was a logistician growing up, but I had a lot of experience. And as I walk into the room, I was going to brief my boss on the condition of the Marines, their combat readiness, just everything and anything, because it was a high threat area there in Sana'a, Yemen. And sure as heck, I come around the corner and he goes, "Oh, Sergeant Major, welcome back. Hey, here's General Neller. Why don't you brief him on the Yemen trip?" I was already intimidated by the guy because he's very demanding, very unemotional, comes across as a complete hard ass. So luckily I have my book in my hand. I had taken time to rewrite everything from tactics to, sectors of fire to morale and MWR and health and welfare and everything. And it was my first exposure to General Neller since he was the CG at 3rd Marine Division. And I gave him a 15-minute rundown on everything, and I answered all of his questions. I was actually pretty proud of myself because it was on the spot. And I earned the trust and respect from that guy that day for the rest of my assignment, because I was not a grunt. I was outside of my lane. I was speaking tactics. I was speaking all kinds of things. And what it taught me is we need to be prepared for that as enlisted men. And to your point, we got to be able to talk tactics. We got to be able to talk morale, welfare, discipline, the whole package. And that's what I took away from General Neller. And so when I knew he was going to be commandant, I told myself, matter of fact, I talked to him before he assumed his post, after he got selected. I knew. I told myself, Marine Corps, you can stand by.
Stand by.
You can stand by. And a lot of people were surprised because they know how coarse he is. And I'm sure there was a lot of officers that were like, oh, my God.
This guy.
Yeah. But you know what? He's been one of the greatest things that's happened to us.
Yeah. So I was at the advanced course when he first got installed as commandant, and he came out and spoke to us. And it was my first time hearing his name. I'd been outside of the fleet at that point in time. I left in 2008, didn't come back in until 2000, in my opinion, 2016.
Wow.
So I was gone doing the external assignments, schoolhouse, DIA, NSA, before going to coming out here to 3MEF. But it was when I was at that assignment in San Antonio that I was afforded the opportunity to hear him speak at Quantico, and he came in and they rushed us all into the theater there, and just to hear his perspective, and the things that were center mass in his thought processes really kind of awakened the fact that we are we're at a seminal moment in our history as a warfighting organization. And I've heard him compared to some other commandants that were disruptive innovators for their time, and one of which is Krulak, and the other is General Gray. And so I want to ask you, Sergeant Major, what is it do you think that allows some commandants to kind of stand out from others? Is it personality, or do you think it's they all have that capability, but it's just a confluence of circumstances and personalities and leadership and political climate? or is it just certain individuals are just supremely prepared for that position?
Yeah, very good question. I think it's a combination of all of that. Some commandants have the good fortune of serving under, a president that's a little more amicable to military, or it may not be. Funding, budgets, how our economic situation is in the nation drives what a commandant can and can't do, how successful they're going to be. In General Neller's case, he's very studied. He has researched what General Gray did. He's a warfighter-minded guy first, and he's, like I said before, he was a rebel growing up. As a first lieutenant, he was getting his butt chewed for going against the grain and doing things he was told not to do.
Yeah,
he's always been that guy, and so he was here under President Obama. He was able to do some things, but not everything that he wanted. And now under President Trump, he's able to do different things that he may have not been able to do previously.
Right.
But I think everything on General Neller derives from what he's always believed as an officer, and that is that radical or change it needs to be consistent. You need to keep up with your times, and you need to get ahead of your enemies. And that is exactly what he's doing. I mean, when he was at Marine Corps University, he was fighting for enlisted education. That was his biggest thing. So guess what? All these initiatives that are going right now, this is General Neller going back to one-star General Neller saying, this is what I said back then. I couldn't do it back then because I didn't, whatever reason.
Yeah.
But now I'm the commandant. We're going to do this.
Guess what?
We're going to do this.
Stand by.
That's right. So, so the initiatives in the past that he really believed in have always been there. He is just now finally in a position to where he's able to execute and do all that. And for him, it's taking advantage of the position that you're in and the authorities to actually do things you have always believed were good were good and for the better of the institution. That's what I think General Neller is doing and why. And he's absolutely going to be remembered. If anybody has any common sense about leadership, about making change, about being different, if we don't talk about General Neller for years to come, well, I sure am, because he's been that to me.
From the mock, fundamental to our character as a Marine Corps is our role as a nation's force in readiness. We must continue to be ready for operations across the range of military operations. At the same time, we recognize the current and future fight may not be what we experienced in the past. It will encompass not just the domains of land, air, and sea, but also space and the cyber domain. It will include information operations and operations across the electromagnetic spectrum. It will involve rapidly changing and evolving technologies and concepts, which will force us to be more agile, flexible, and adaptable. Most importantly, it will require Marines who are smart, fit, disciplined, resilient, and able to adapt to uncertainty and to the unknown. So what he's painting there is something that I don't know if our young Marines are prepared for yet, Sergeant Major. We are going to inundate these young Marines who are already acclimatized to information overload, but we're going to put significantly more information in their hands and expect them on a dime to be Lance Corporals in a 4-block war.
Yep.
How do we prepare them?
Yeah, it's funny that you asked this question because we've talked about if you broke that statement you just read to me, we've already talked about every part of that today.
Yeah.
Just by coincidence, by chance.
It was
It's by design.
It's by design.
Well, you're a smart guy.
I had you outlined.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, man, it's doing everything that the commandant has already asked us to do, and that may sound like a cookie cutter answer, but we got to build resilient Marines. We have to believe in the Lance Corporal Seminar, the Corporal's Course, and MOS roadmaps at the same time. We have to teach our Marines from the very beginning how to follow a training schedule and stick to it, and how to plan and do the logistics. As a young sergeant, I remember planning an entire amphibious offload. Amtraks, hitting the beach, airdrops right over the beach. I was assisted by a staff sergeant and lieutenant in the company, but I, as a sergeant, planned that. Can today's sergeants plan a full amphibious operation like that? I don't know. I have no idea. So we have to reinvest in a lot of the basics of just the daily function of the Marine Corps. I don't think we do that well. I mean, I PT in civilian attire because I PT by myself. But if I was a sergeant major in a unit right now, I would be more of a fan of PTing green on green. I think we've gotten away from some of the basics of what it is to be disciplined. We allow our Marines to be too much individual focused, vice institutionally focused. But to your point, I absolutely agree. I'm overloaded with information. I don't have enough time to read everything I get. I get over 300-400 emails a day. I spend the majority of my Saturday catching up and reading the longer ones that I have to actually read and
Right.
be prepared to speak to. Or Sergeant Major Green can call me any day and ask me, what about this? And I have to be able to answer him. And it happens. It happens every month. And so I think a lot of it is it's a multi-stage approach. Integrating a little bit more slowly of some of those things you're talking about at the different tiers of our education system for the enlisted Marines. It can't just be about discipline, ethics and morals. It has to be tactical, fundamental concepts. Even we're talking about introducing the Marine Corps planning process to sergeants now in a much more better detail.
It touches on something Master Guns Cornett said, it was early to know. That the Army has implemented in certain avenues, in that the stuff that we teach to master sergeants and master gunnery sergeants, first sergeants and sergeants major, we need to be teaching to our staff sergeants or our sergeants.
Absolutely. We got to start earlier. If we want to be taken serious in the joint world, if we want to make a bigger impact as a professional organization, if we want to get our people to have reasonable paces of learning, because different Marines learn at different rates, as you know.
Right.
A GT 90 guy is going to learn way different than a GT 120 guy. Right?
Yes.
And that's actually beneficial. So the guy that's already going to be a stud at the sergeant and knows master gunny stuff, he's just going to learn general officer level stuff as a sergeant.
Right.
Vice, what we're learning as E9. So I think we need to spread out our knowledge. We need to integrate more of the stuff we're requiring of our people throughout our career. And then somehow be able to validate and test it.
Right.
Whether it's by, doing TDGs with lance corporals and corporals. I've done it. When I was at the mall, I asked my sergeant majors to do TDGs with lance corporals and corporals at their courses, and it was tough initially. But you're right. There's information overload. We got to cut back on what we're talking about. There's way too much going on. We got to redefine. We're redefining the MOS for sergeant majors and first sergeants right now. Are we doing too much? Are we doing not enough? Let's get things back in the right lanes. Let's focus. And then what other areas of that community can be passed off or should be a part of Master Sergeant Master Gunny that they could do? But probably most of it. There's a lot of Master Gunnies and Master Sergeants already doing things that are in the sergeant major world that should be a shared responsibility. But I'm getting off of the original question, but we got to spread load our training, including the stuff you talked about, the technological, the information. We got to expose our people sooner, gradually, so that when they get to sergeant, now we can talk a little more in depth. But I mean, it's already happening in the infantry.
Right.
You got the technical advisor that's going to be a part of the squad.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy's job is going to be to know drones, to know anything with electromagnetic that's other than the infantry stuff. And he's going to be responsible for training the rifle squad. That's all General Neller.
Yeah.
Spreading that, what your question is right now, spreading that across infantry. But what about the rest of the Marine Corps? We say every Marine's a rifleman. Every MOS has got to do some version of that somehow.
Yeah.
So it's going to take a shift in mindset of the Marine Corps while remaining with our core competencies. And oh, by the way, who's going to be the next commandant? Is he going to flip this whole Marine Corps upside down and go back to just, I don't think so. I think our commandants will progress, but there have been commandants that
You've taken a step back.
Yeah, they've taken a step back. And the next commandant's got to be critical.
Something that Master Gun Sam Carter, who's currently the 2651 ISR systems engineer, Ockfield specialist, stated was that for us, cognitive capacity would in the future operational environment be deemed as a measurable resource. And preparing these young Marines, and you touched on it when you said that you used to do tactical decision games with your Lance Corporals. And I do know that our experimental battalion, I want to say it's 2-5, but I could be mistaken there.
3-5.
Was it 3-5?
Yeah, yeah.
Was affecting a decision room where instead of going to the chapel to get spiritually fit, instead of going to the gym to get physically fit, or the education center to get, academically fit, you go to the decision room to get taught how to make decisions in a shortened time frame under intense pressure and in a competitive environment where you can make mistakes, where you can take chances and learn from your failures
Yeah.
and exercise that decision making process. So the other thing that I wanted to ask you was if I could transport you back in time and sit Sergeant Major Marquez down with Sergeant Marquez, what would you say to him?
First thing I would say is you need to read more earlier. I didn't read as much as I should have. I only read what I was told to read, what was a promotion requirement. I read the things that were important for not just the boards, but for my MOS. And it was very limited outside of that. I followed the Marine Corps, the Commandant's reading list. I was never open like the other services are to reading a broad spectrum of things like leadership to finance to spiritual wellness. They've always done that. It's just the Marine Corps has been read Marine Corps history and leadership and you're good. Here's some combat too.
Right.
I would have told myself to read a lot more, expand my horizons. I would have told myself to go to college more aggressively. I'm still trying to get my bachelor's degree. I'm about 8 classes out. And I would have made myself go to college. People wanted me to be an officer multiple occasions, but I didn't want to be an officer. I always I'd rather be an educated senior enlisted Marine. I like rolling my sleeves up and being with the Marines. I just never had the heart to be an officer. But I still could have. I think that affected my attitude towards college and other things. I should have still continued to educate myself better. I think I could have done a better job about looking at other leadership styles. I learned by my own mistakes. I did have indirect mentors, but I never really had conversations with those people. I just followed and took what I thought was their examples, good and bad,
right,
and I used them or not. I could have done a better job about actually becoming a mentor instead of just trying to be this image to everybody of what a good NCO was. I don't know that I talked enough to people. I try to just be an example, where now that I realize years later that being a mentor is not just your example, but actually affecting and influence people by conversation. I would have told myself to be interested in,
to be engaged,
be a little more engaged with conversation. We had those conversations, but they weren't as in-depth as they are now, what's expected of a true definition of a mentor today. And so I think those are the biggest things. I've always been fit. I've always been a good person. I've always been a good leader in general. I've always been kind of semi-intelligent. I was able to keep up with the pace of the Marine Corps. Rules and regulations, I've always been on track with that. But it's those other things in personal improvement, expanding my horizon, seeking harder educational and mental challenges early on in my career, vice just dealing with the immediate necessities of leading a small unit, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah. That's probably the biggest thing I would do all over again.
Would you say we're ready?
I think we'll do well. I worry about the mental toughness and resiliency of some of our youngest Marines. You'll hear me say this when you go to my PMEs or some of my discussions is I'm done with people blaming the war for our ailments and our deficiencies. Okay, we've been saying that for like 3-4 years now. What are we doing about it?
Right.
How are we preparing our Marines to be resilient and mentally tough? The only way you can do that is by doing all those things we talked about already, is pushing them harder, challenging them harder. Unit PT is very important, not because you're going to get out there and wear them out, because it teaches teamwork, camaraderie. It teaches us the pride of not wanting to fall out because you're with your peers and it's embarrassing, it's bad. We need to go to the field. We do need to put people in shitty situations and bad weather. We need to turn off the phone for a minute, for a day, whatever. They're not used to that. I mean, you and I had to write letters home. When I was here as a brand new PFC,
I found some of my journals recently, journals that I wrote to my father while I was on deployment, and he passed away a few years back, and I never gave them to him. But I just, things that I wrote down, they were for him, but I retained them, and it was just interesting to go through that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But
different world.
Earlier you talked about funerals and the importance of going home. And my grandmother died. I was on ship, and I never got to say goodbye to her, and that was my biggest regret. So you fast forward, my grandpa was getting old. He had cancer, and I knew it was either go home or take my wife on an amazing honeymoon vacation type of thing. Right, 20 years later, or whatever it was, 15 years later, we chose to go home, and I got to spend 4 days with my grandpa. I asked him about his entire life.
Yeah.
I'd made that time. I could have went somewhere else. Biggest regret that I will never have is that I spent time with my grandpa. And now I know that he was a farmer in the 30s, 40s here, crossed back and forth. That's how I know about immigration was so loose and free. It wasn't a big deal. All my family's history is now ingrained in my mind, and I can pass it on as the oldest son because I spent that time. But that also built my resiliency, my mental toughness, making sacrifices. We have to push our Marines harder. I don't think we're pushing our Marines harder. Staff NCO's got to be engaged in their face. You got to be testing them. You got to be talking to them. That's why I said the training schedule thing. Force them to a standard. Hold them accountable to it. PT them hard. Smartly, though. Take care of them. Show them how to PT. God, I wish that some of the mentors I had when it came to physical fitness that taught me how to PT right. I've been injury-free until I was 47 in the Marine Corps. Yeah. That's unheard of. And that was because I was raised right, taught when not to push past my limits. But I've also done some really tough things, like I was an MCIWS, one of the hardest schools I've ever done. We gotta work harder on resiliency. I don't think we're 100%. I don't think we're even 85% where we need to be on mental toughness. And a lot of that is by going through physical challenges. You gotta push your people with mental and physical endurance. I like the decision room you're talking about. That is a great idea. What a way to push and test people past their limits, because you take it hard when you get something wrong.
Oh yeah.
Today's society is in a society of I want to do well. We may not all want to get a trophy, but we want to get a pat on the back, because it's important in life to be successful and do good at what you're doing. And in our business, it's lives, saving lives or taking lives. And man, we have to get better at being stronger. And to me, it's on the Staff NCOs. If our Marines are not weak, you got to look at your immediate Staff NCO leadership and start from there.
And with that, we're out.
Peace. All right, man. How was it? Good?
What do you think?
I think it was good. It's my first time. I don't know. It felt good.
I think it was perfect.
Yeah.
I think I got a great snapshot of Mario Marquez as a leader, as a human being, as a Marine, as a sergeant major, as a citizen, as a patriot, hell, even as an immigrant.
Yeah.
We touched on a lot of facets of who you are and your perspective that I think that is going to reach the junior Marines, because your MEF is extended beyond the horizon.
Yeah.
Think about that. And you can't sit down with every single Marine for 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
But every single Marine that has their own device or access to the internet, which is all of them, fortunately, will have access to this conversation. And that your perspective, your insights, your experiences, your lessons learned, your attributes and qualities as a Marine, and I think we'll all be better for it. What do you think Neller or Mattis would say about this podcast?
I don't know. I think they'd be okay with it. I think we're talking about things they're talking about. I think it would be relevant for them. They may not agree with every single little topic, any minor point that we talk about, but when you talk about enlisted leaders talking modern, severely important, critically important issues, future of the force, technological challenges, war of signatures, I mean, that's what we should be talking about for one.
Yeah.
So I think it'll give them confidence. We just got to get the rest of us to talk and be able to speak at this. Hopefully I addressed all your questions, at least semi close to being up with the times. And that's without kind of reviewing anything. It's just you're kind of obligated to just be there, right? I mean, that's one of the things I didn't really say, but maybe I alluded to it. You just have to be able to perform at the level we're speaking to right now. All E8s and E9s specifically should be able to talk like this.
Do you think there's some of us that are incapable of that?
Yeah.
So how do we address it?
We gotta. Well, so one of the things
because if those E8s or E9s aren't capable of this type
back to what
this type of exchange,
yeah, they're not taking care of Marines. They're not. I can talk to you about the MEF budget. I can talk about GTC, government travel charge cards. Some people say it's not my lane. We have staff officers that do that, but some sergeant majors will tell you, I don't care about the budget. It doesn't affect me. Bullshit.
Yeah, it does.
It affects you. You were just talking about schooling.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like trying to get to the working group for Information Warfare Integration Division.
Yeah.
Right? IWID. Battle of Signatures.
You want a refill on your coffee?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
I'm listening, man. Let me just get a cup.
If I can't get to that conversation, General Nicholson's perspective isn't being advocated for.
We talked about that. You got to, as a senior enlisted, you got to be an advocate for your Marines in all facets of leadership.
And one of the things that came up recently, especially as it pertains to our community, was go ahead. It was a statement that General Nicholson made as it pertains to radio reconnaissance.
Yeah.
He said that we need to retain, and I wrote it down and I reverted back to it because I'm not a radio recon guy, and they're a subculture within our OC field. But a lot of my closest friends in uniform are radio reconnaissance guys. I know what they bring to the fight, and it is a unique capability. But General Nicholson said we need to retain that, and so for me, whenever that skill set or that capability is up for discussion or on the chopping block, because it is a significant manpower sink.
Yeah.
Or draw, depending on how you view things. Some people see it as a sink. Some people see it as a great place to stress the Marines out and train them for that demanding style of mission. And some of our best MARSOC personnel are from the radio reconnaissance community. So for me, I need to be part of any conversation that is involved with those guys. Same thing with electronic warfare support teams. Those things that are not even initially operationally capable. We don't know yet how those guys are going to be employed. And hearing the DCI talk about it on earlier this week, they're still discussing that. And for me, the grunts are only going to get to a certain level of proficiency with the electromagnetic spectrum.
Yeah.
They're going to need no shit smees. A Sergeant Castro to walk up and say, "Hey, Gunny, hey, sir, I'm your Huckleberry."
Yeah, that's right.
This is my area of expertise, and I've got tools and capabilities and linguists and devices and connectivity and an analytical capability that you won't have. I can focus on that in a way that like every Marine is going to go through combat lifesavers course, right?
Yep.
But not every Marine is going to be a doc.
That's right.
And in that regard, those EWSTs, those SIGINT support teams, and there's even talk of marrying those requirements up so that there's just a signal support team. That team and most importantly, that team leader needs to be able to walk both sides of that line between the infantry and the intelligence, electromagnetic spectrum world, information warfare domain, in a way that is going to enable that war fighting capability for the infantry. And unfortunately, we're not doing the best job of preparing those young corporals and sergeants to do that right now. And I'm not the only one that's taken that to heart. I've got a whole list of guys that are alongside me, addressing that issue throughout the radio battalions, and at headquarters Marine Corps, to ensure that the policy, the doctrine, the manning training, the equipment is all where it needs to be. Because I've got to look the Division G3 in the face and say, my boys are ready.
Yeah.
And not everybody else is going to have to do that.
Yeah.
And I've got to be able to look you in the face and say, we've got the Marines that can fulfill this requirement, Sergeant Major. And I the last thing I want to be is a guy that can't help the MEF make board.
Yeah.
If we're playing spades.
One of the things I didn't talk about was I didn't go to my first combat until I was a gunny.
Oh, wow.
And man, but I've been in real situations. I just didn't engage or get fired at per se directly.
So you were in combat operations, but you weren't actually in combat.
I was in Guatemala. Right?
Okay.
So there was combat around us. We just weren't targeted because we were Americans. They knew we were there. We were doing medical, dental stuff, but that still trained me, right? But
was it Zapatistas?
Yeah, it was part of that. They were crossing the border, but it was before that. It was right before. It was right about the same time.
EZLN?
Yeah. So all that stuff. And I was down in a place called Puerto San Jose. And then when I caught dengue fever, I was way out in the fucking jungle somewhere. Ooh. I don't remember, but I got bit like 2 weeks earlier. I almost died. I remember being in school. No windows, concrete schoolhouse, single room, these concrete cement seats for the kids, just really uncomfortable. And I was laying there. I remember waking up and I had IVs in me. There was tarantulas everywhere, right? Everywhere. And then the chaplain was standing over me.
Ouch.
And I was like, and Lando was in my battalion back when that happened. And he didn't go with me, but so I was really grateful that I had 12 years of training before I went to combat. But even then, the reason I said we're not ready, even then I still took things for granted. I still was complacent. I still could have done more, way more. But because our MOSs hold us to certain standards and regulations and all that, we didn't really always embrace the full Marine concept, the whole Marine concept.
Yeah.
Until I went to OIF 1 as a gunny. And I was so glad that I had done all the tactics stuff that I did, because I was an ops chief for the MU. And I was literally telling my Marines how to sandbag dig. No armor, skin Humvee, sandbags, fucking Kevlar sheets.
Right.
I mean, it was fucking Mad Max type of armor, homemade stuff.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was crazy.
He just bolt on shit. Yeah.
It was crazy.
Witness me.
Yeah. And luckily we didn't get hit with anything. Not our convoy, but other convoys weren't so fortunate. That's where Hugh got his Navy Cross, and some of my I grew up with all those guys. Brad Castle, all those guys I grew up with. And they were different MOSs, but I'd run into them at some point. But anyways, hopefully it was good for you. I'm very critical of myself. I can always go back and always critique what I said.
So are you going to listen to this podcast?
Yeah, I'm going to listen to it.
You know how long it is?
I have no idea.
3 hours and 18 minutes.
Wow.
Are you going to forward it to anybody?
I am. I don't know who yet, but I didn't talk about him. I really wanted to talk about him. I completely forgot about him. But my best friends on the whole planet are three of my three NCOs that were with me in Okinawa that pushed me hard just by their example. They were studs. They were solid NCOs. They were good at everything, MOS to Marine Corps. Between the four of us, we won every board in that battalion for 2 years. And I'm still friends with all three of them. One's a border patrol agent, works up in New York State. He's a detective or an inspector, somebody high. The other one, Jose, is a anti-terrorism officer at LAX. Weapon carrying, works for ICE or one of the departments.
Right, HSI or something.
Yeah,
like
and then Manny Gonzalez is a retired sergeant major. He lives in Arizona. He was a reserve sergeant major. But we all served together, and I kind of want to send it to them because they're my biggest fans, or my biggest critics, which they don't critique me a lot. They tell me I'm a badass like every week. I'm like, stop, man.
Yeah.
I'm just doing what you guys would have done if you were here, and
Yeah.
how we held ourselves to a standard.
Yeah.
So I'd like to send it to them. I'd like to send it to Mari. Mari and I are really close now as far as show stuff, but of course I want to show it to my wife.
Yeah.
Because
So
my wife's probably my biggest fan.
So that leads me to my next question. I was thinking about asking Mari to do a show to get the spouse's perspective.
She would do great.
And at some point in time, should she feel up to it? I don't know. It's tough though. Yeah, well, I know she will. But I was thinking about getting Liz too to get the spouse's perspective, or maybe have a talk with several spouses.
There's some really good ones out there.
Yeah,
I can recommend a few to you that. So you'd want to. There's different perceptions of spouses, right? Officers' wives that people think they're completely different, think differently. My wife's very sensitive to that.
So I was thinking Madi, Belinda, and Liz would be a good triple guest.
Yep.
Triple simultaneous guest.
Oh yeah.
Because I would just put a microphone in omnidirectional mode and just let them go.
Yeah.
And just kind of throw some things out for consideration. Just to kind
and what that does is it keeps it varied, it keeps it limited, and they would be courteous of each other as they try to get their points across. And I don't know how long you'd want to shoot it for, but she'd be good in a group setting or individual. I mean, obviously, but yeah, my wife's more shy. She won't do it just because she's
it's just not who she
Japanese.
is. Yeah.
But
does she speak English?
She does. She does.
She prefers.
Let me see if she's awake. Have you met her yet?
I've not met her before.
And with that, we're out.